Gentlemen, and a very welcome to you all here today and online. It's Thursday the 16th of May 2024. Today's day 2 of submission hearings for the proposed Palmerston North City Council Long-Term Plan 2024 to 34. Right, first of all we will start with a karakia, and I'd like to ask Councillor Zabalan to please stand.
Mihi, Mr Chair. Me inoi tātou. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa. Haumie, huie, tae ki e.
Thank you, Councillor. Next we'll move to apologies. Okay. We are doing housekeeping first. So, in the case of an emergency, on hearing the alarm, please leave the site immediately to your nearest fire exit. Evacuate to the assembly area, the clock tower, Te Maraohina, the square. Smoking is prohibited within the council public entrance building site. The defibrillator is located at the bottom of the stairs that you just walked up, and please report any near-miss incidents to the committee administrator. Okay, next we have apologies. And we have apologies from Councillor Mickelard, Councillor Wood, Councillor Dennison, early departure, Rachel Bowen, early departure, and the Mayor, early departure. Thank you. I'd like to move that. A seconder, please. Okay, seconded, Councillor Hancock. Thank you. Councillor Meehan.
Yeah, apology for session 9 and 10.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Okay, and we will vote, please. Okay, that passed 14 votes for, none against, no abstentions. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to what we're all here for today. And I'll invite submitters to the table. I'll announce their number to the elected members. Each speaker has 10 minutes and we will run certainly to time. You'll get a warning at 30 seconds. And make sure you leave a bit of time for questions. Councillors will ask you questions. And away we go. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. Right, first I'd like to call Rachel from Horizons Regional Council, and that is number 1140. And Wiremu Te Awi Awi.
Kia ora koutou. Nā mihi nui, I te karakia. He kuima e kuruma, rangatira katoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. On behalf of the Horizons Good Guys, kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to our submission. I'd like to put in an apology from the Chief Executive, Michael McCartney, and of course I have with me one of our lesser known councillors that you might not have met before, Wiremu Te Awi Awi. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the relationship we have with the City Council and the work that we do across multiple areas of business. Our staff do work closely together, and that's for the benefit of the city and for the region. So I look forward to building on and enhancing those relationships. Of course, you have my submission or our submission in front of you. I'm just going to highlight a couple of key points. The first one is around passenger transport. So, of course, you'd be aware that Horizons has invested significantly in a new bus network for the city, and it's very successful from how it's rolling out, and we're looking forward to working with you to enhance that network as much as possible. Because, of course, the City Council has a key role in ensuring the success of that network because of your role in funding the infrastructure and a number of aspects that support user uptake of the network. So you'll see in the submission, there's a bit of focus there on some areas of infrastructure that we would appreciate further or to ensure that there's funding in those areas, but further clarity in a few particular areas. The central bus hub, we would urge you to put that as a high priority for development through the long-term plan. We appreciate that in the past it's been difficult to know what structure that bus hub needed to take when the structure of the network wasn't clear, but the network is now in place, and we would urge you to make that a high priority so that is raised to the level of the service that is being provided in terms of the bus network around the city. I'd also encourage the council to look at a range of other ways in that you can increase the uptake, because of course the more mode shift you can get, the more you can meet some of your own goals around EcoCity and reducing carbon emissions and those sorts of things. So we would encourage you not just to be working in terms of infrastructure, but looking at how there are other tweaks that you could do, whether it is through traffic lights at the intersections where the buses get held up, so giving priority to the buses. I would suggest that you look at a number of other areas as well as to how you could champion it and get more people on the buses. So just as an example, from the FDS hearings on Monday, submitters in the information sheet they're given are told where the closest free parking is to the venue, but there's no mention of which bus stop or how to get here by bus. So these are the sorts of things that you could take ownership of to promote the service, because it's for your benefit and the city's benefit to get as great a share of mode onto the buses as we can. And the Palmerston North Governance Group, the joint group between the two councils, has been really successful in terms of shaping up that network, and I look forward to working with that group as we continue on to continue to enhance the network and optimise it as much as we possibly can. The last point I wanted to make was in terms of emergency management, so that was to thank the council for their joining in with our a simulated emergency management scenario at the end of last year. So that was a regional exercise where all of the TAs and numerous other organisations came together, and we looked at what would happen if a Gabriel-size event had hit our region, and each council was given scenarios to address, and I think the City Council, one of the scenarios across the 3 days of the event that was simulated was that one of the stop banks was going to give way and the entire suburb needed to be evacuated. So it was just an exercise to say, what would we do? Are we equipped? Where are the holes? I understand there is investment in that space, but I would urge you to have a look and check that you have adequate resourcing in the emergency management space to ensure that you have a resilient, strong response, because it is a matter of when, not if, the next event does hit. Otherwise, I think I'll leave it there and happy to take questions.
Great, thank you. First we have Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Rachel. Kia ora, Wiremu. Thank you. A couple of things. And just responding to your written submission, you didn't mention it in your just in your commentary there. Is there something about the dam at Turitea that you know that we don't know?
It's just in terms of the dam safety regulations, so I'm not sure if you've been...
No, we're aware of all that, but you're...
Yeah. Just highlighting it because it is a new thing that's making sure people are aware of it in terms of their long-term plans.
Been around for a couple of years, yeah. Okay, all right. And at the terminal, and sort of transport, and acknowledge the investment in the buses, which the city ratepayers have significantly made. and your leadership there. In fact, we spoke yesterday, and it is a question, we spoke yesterday about the ongoing uses of the buses, and actually several councillors went home on the bus and got home safely. So the end of trip facilities, are you thinking that should be at the new terminal?
I think it's a range of places because of some of the end of the bus runs as well. I've heard drivers talk about whether there could be portaloos even. I don't know the detail behind that, but I think it's worth officers having a discussion.
Yeah.
To see
So the
what
new
could be
terminal
done
would be an
there.
obvious one where we could
Yeah.
have some, and possibly maybe in a couple of other places. Would Horizons consider, and we've spoken about this before, putting some transport staff, if the city was to put transport staff at a terminal facility which, had some scale?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, cool. And just finally, my last question. We had a number of submissions around flood protection, and they should have really came to your council. One was around Ashurst, and I understand there's no LTP funding for any further protection for Ashurst. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. No new infrastructure.
Okay, so it's only got 100-year flood protection, even for the existing people that live there, let alone any new. And it's in our, and we're going to decide on it very soon around the future development. What are we going to do about that? Are we just going to leave it?
I think that's a conversation that needs to be had through the future development strategy. I'm sure that's going to be a good starting off point for that.
But it's responsibility of Horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look across the scale of the region, and I think Gabriel has brought this into sharp focus, and I'm aware that this is our LTP rather than yours, but it's not possible to do all of the flood protection work across everywhere that's required. So there needs to be a process of us prioritising that and working through that. So that's one of the processes we're
So an urbanised village is not priority?
it's one of the processes we're in at the moment of working through where the priorities are.
Okay, all right. So how do we, what's the process for a city council to, I suppose, lobby the regional council that there needs to be some extra flood protection there?
So definitely through the long-term plan is the right place to do it, but I think
we've done.
that FDS is a good place to start.
Okay, all right. We'll continue those conversations. But thank you for your submission.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou, good to see you both. Question around the bus services and whether Horizons is getting any feedback around, now that we have services running until 9 p.m., the lighting and general safety around the city centre terminal. Is there any feedback coming into Horizons about that?
I don't know in detail, but I have heard specific reference to the central hub area that at night that's not as appealing as it could be. But I'm happy to that's something that we can pass on that feedback as part of your processes too.
Thank you. The other question was around air quality, and both through our submissions process and just kind of this time of year when everybody lights up their fire, we do tend to hear a little bit about air quality in the city. Can I just confirm what the current situation is around air quality monitoring?
We don't have an air quality monitor in the city.
And is Horizons giving any consideration around that?
We do have a mobile one, and there's consideration around how that could be used more widely rather than just the main identified airshed areas.
And I guess, is that an active consideration or is it more of a theoretical consideration?
No, it's an active one because we've upgraded those monitors to meet the PM 2.5 standards. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That's us for now, and thank you for coming in and making deliberations on the 29th or 30th of May. Thank you. Right, next we move to number 793, so Isla Wilson. Good morning. If you just touch the right-hand button, and that will light you up.
Okay. Kia ora. Good morning. Good morning, Mayor, Chair, Councillors. My name's Zoala Wilson. I'd just like to quote George Bernard Shaw once said, "I am of the opinion my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it's my privilege to do for it what I can." I echo those words for my life. Be a servant to people, and it's my privilege to do for it what I can. I would like to quote the Mayor and the Chief Executive in this book. Quote, "We're listening. Please make sure your voice is heard as we shape the future of the city that we all love so proud to call home." Unquote. But are you really listening? Are you really listening, Mayor, to the people of the city? Because I've been to the residents' meetings and they're not happy. There's an outrage out there, and I was really, really sad to see how unhappy some of the residents are. And it's over so I will speak on the Featherston Street Cycleway. You've got my submissions on all the other stuff, but that is a really important issue because it's an issue that I was dealing with. I moved down from Auckland. This is my second year. And it's the same issues that I was dealing with in Auckland. Auckland City was known as the super city. Unfortunately, it ended up to be a super shitty city. It was just chaos.
I'll just stop you there. We don't have that sort of language.
Okay, my apology, I'll retract that. So it's all to do with this cycle lane plan that's been rolled out. They turn up at my community of Grey Lynn with this plan to redesign our shopping centre, destroyed Westland Village, Garnet Road, Old Mill Road, Westmere, without the consultations of the community. They say they consulted us, but they didn't. So I moved down here and I discovered it's the same plan that Featherston Street has been rolled out. From lived experience, it doesn't work. I'm not anti-cycleway or anti-cyclist. I am of support of safe cycleways that works for the community, for the people, and for the city. The previous council left the city in such a chaos and a broken people in spirit and economically. So I'm asking you, the Mayor, the Council, are you really going to listen to the people like you said you are in here? The cycleways, I believe, can be done really well, but what I and all of us don't understand, why does a bus stop has to be put in the middle of the road? It was the same in Auckland. They came and moved a very functionable bus stop that was safe and place it right in the middle of the road. And I kept thinking, that doesn't work. It's going to kill somebody. And they also put it right outside schools. Now, that is a dangerous safety issue. And if this plan is going to be rolled out right throughout the country, which I believe it is, what is the purpose of these cycle lanes? Is it for safety and to build an eco-city, or is it to destroy a city and create chaos and outrage with the people? So I truly believe that needs to be rethink with this plan. And I challenge you to really listen to what you say here. We're listening. So the people of Palmerston North, I love the city. I am loving it. But I didn't realise I was going to walk into the same unhappiness from residents as I discovered here at Featherston Street. So I leave that with you, Mayor, Chair, and the Councillor. Keep the city a beautiful city it is, and make our transport work for the people, for the disability community, for wheelchair-bound people. They belong to our community as well as the elderly. Thank you.
Thank you. Online, we have a question from Councillor Bowen.
You can hear me.
Good
Yes,
evening.
we can.
Hello.
Thank you for your submission and coming in to speak to it. My question is very simple. I wanted to ask you if you feel that we are listening today.
I've been to the resident community and I sat back and I was just, I wanted to move down to Palmerston North and just keep a low profile. So I went to the residents community meeting and there was an outrage, really unhappy residents. And I felt compelled to stand up and share what, from 2015 to 2022, the battle that we went through with our community. So they say no, the council and the mayor are not listening.
Okay, I think that doesn't really answer my question, which is about coming into the chamber today. Do you feel that we are listening?
Well, today is the first consultation submission, I believe. We will.
Today.
Are you listening? Well, I hope you all are. I like to believe that you are. I like to pray that you will take the people's voice into consideration and rethink your plans over the cycleways at Featherston Street.
Thank you for trying to answer that for me.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Zabellan. Thank you.
Thank you. So, there we go. Thank you for your submission. I just was interested in your thoughts on the difference between refitting a cycleway into an existing road carriage or versus when we lay new roads, incorporating a cycle lane into a new road. And do you have thoughts on new roads being laid with cycleways intact rather than a retrofitting option?
So if the existing road works, safe, and catering for everybody, why do you have to refit with a new road that's dangerous, unwelcome, unwanted, costly, and outrage the community that are paying for it, and putting a bus stop in the middle of the road that stops the traffic from moving and flowing safely? Does it make sense?
My apologies. I'm more referring to areas of new growth and development where there are no roads currently. If we were laying new roads, would you be supportive of cycle lanes being installed where the environment is designed to fit them?
If it's designed safely and for the purpose it is intended for, why not? Yeah.
Thank you. And do you also have views on pedestrian safety, the condition of our footpaths and how easy it is for people who can't drive or cycle to walk around the city?
If it's, one of the things that we dealt with, the plan in Auckland, they came and narrowed the footpath, and there was no room for sensory impaired residents and wheelchairs. So if it is catering for the disability community, sensory impaired and wheelchair, that is a community sometimes, I believe, new plans are completely ignored. It's almost like erasing these community off the plan. So the footpath wide enough for all.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, that's the end of the questions. So thank you very much for coming in. We're having deliberations on the 29th, 30th of May, and I'm sure lots here will take into consideration what your views.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next we move to number 704 councillors, and I'd like to invite Mela, Melodin and Kate to please speak. Welcome, ladies. Press the right-hand button on your console and it will light up red. You can speak. You've got 10 minutes and leave some time for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Do I keep raising? Okay. Kia ora koutou. Thank you to all of the council for welcoming us to this session today. We are a group of Year 13 Social Studies students from Palmerston North Girls High School who are passionate about public safety and advocating for safe and accessible community places. I'm Kate.
I'm Madeline.
And I'm Malia, and we are here to discuss adding lights to the Manawatu Riverside walkways to make the riverside walkways safer for people to enjoy.
Especially for the three of us as young women, we currently don't feel safe walking by the river after dark, which is annoying and becoming even more limiting to us as we head into the winter months with less daylight hours.
A study conducted by criminology professors from the University of Pennsylvania, University of Maryland, and the Health Lab Department of the University of Chicago showed that, quote, over a 3-year period, the lighting intervention reduced outdoor nighttime crimes by 45% and outdoor daytime crimes by 39%, unquote. We looked at lots of studies that showed similar results, but decided that most importantly, we wanted to hear the voices of our own local people, so we conducted our own survey in the Manawatu community.
We had 429 participants, with 94.9 being female and 5.1 being male. Our results showed that 82.3% of participants have felt unsafe walking outside in the dark, and 88.3% have chosen not to go out or walk outside in the dark because they have felt unsafe. 94.4% think that there is a need for increased lighting of public walkways, such as the Manawatu River walkways. 88.1% think that adding lights to the Manawatu River walkways would make them more likely to use the walkways and feel safer doing so when it is dark.
Our participants were given the opportunity to voice their opinions, and their responses were enlightening. One participant expressed, "I think that this is a great idea and can only be beneficial. There will be no negative impacts if this is done right and organised well. Safety for Wahine will create a better and more productive community, so the council should definitely get on board." This sentiment echoes the collective voice of our community, emphasising the importance of this initiative.
Another said, unfortunately, as a woman, I was taught from a very early age to never go out after dark, especially not alone, to never walk near vegetation and to never walk in dark areas where you cannot see your exit. I'm the kind of person who very much enjoys going for runs or walking the dog, and I love being able to use the river walkways. However, I am a very busy person, and so if I want to go for a run, I must meticulously plan my day so that I am home well before dark. Adding lights to the Manawatu River walkway would make exercising and the river walkway in general more accessible to me.
It is important to acknowledge there was also some concern that lights may not be the end-all solution, with some participants saying, "I don't know if lighting would help my safety. What if I get kidnapped in the light?" And lights would make it better, but even with lights, I'm not sure I'd feel safe walking down there in the dark.
Other things participants mentioned was designed to ensure that they were eco-friendly and to minimise disruption to birdlife and other wildlife in this protected area. This can be addressed by being strategic about where the lights are placed in relation to the bush and what sections are targeted to be lit up first. Obviously, we are not wildlife experts, but are willing to discuss this further.
Thank you.
Very well done indeed, ladies. And we have a question first from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming in and your submission, and really appreciate the research you did to evidence that. I wanted to stick with the lighting theme and kind of how it relates to perceptions of safety in the city, but I just wanted to ask more around the city center and whether in your experience or your friends and colleagues' experience, if there's any areas in the city center that are felt to be underlit or unsafe due to the lighting environment?
I think, can we all agree that Broadway feels pretty unsafe for us as women? Like, it's a I would never walk there alone after dark.
Yeah.
Super dodgy. I probably wouldn't walk anywhere in town except for maybe George Street, because Like there's
Yeah.
lots of small local businesses that are kind of like open quite late, that feel like there's a bit of community safety there.
I feel like the square also feels like a very unsafe place to walk at night.
And I know that there is some lighting at the square, but it's not really enough. It's kind of more like, it's almost got like a sort of fairy lights, like it's very like minimal lighting vibes, as opposed to being like real, like you can actually have good visibility. Yeah.
The square definitely, and I think that was reinforced by what was had at the youth space when they did the LTP consultation there. But the square generally, in daytime as well, is also not a place people feel particularly safe.
But yeah, our number one place would be the Manawatu River, definitely.
Because there's like no lighting down there, and I feel like it is like such a lovely community space during the summertime, and it does get utilised really well by like lots of families and, well, everyone, but it becomes really somewhere that no one wants to go during the winter. And that's quite a waste of like all of the, I'm imagining lots of money and time that's been put into making so much of it paved nicely down by the riverside.
Great, thank you all. Appreciate the additional insight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have another question from Councillor Isabel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. To my memory, we have had a budget for lighting down at the river before, but it has been cut in this round. Is this something you'd like to see reinstated to our budget?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Just confirming.
And a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in and making a submission. Is there a particular stretch of the river walkways that you think we should prioritise? Because it's quite a long length to look at putting lighting in. Are there stretches that you think that would be more popular than others?
Like, do we reckon, I think by the Fitzherbert Bridge, even where there's the park run on Saturday mornings, that kind of strip of land from the Fitzherbert Bridge to where it finishes at around Albert Street.
Albert Street, yeah.
That would be a really good initial place to start with.
Okay, thank you.
Question from Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, thanks very much for your submission, and I just want to pick up just on what Councillor Barrett asked about before, which is around the CBD. You mentioned that the square is not considered that safe during the daytime as well. Can you expand on that as to why that is?
I think it's because it's somewhere where there's not really any, it's like it's so open to anyone, but I feel like the people that tend to go there, it's not really families, it's quite often like sort of lone men. Yeah. And I think as women, like even walking from like where the square is to over by where George Street is or where the library is, like there's like that diagonal path. I hate walking down there. I would rather just walk on this actual street because it just, yeah, people just come by and you just don't feel very, and there's been like so many incidences that I've heard of anecdotally, so.
Because it's quite central as well. When I said that, I was a lot speaking from what I've heard from other school children and how that's where a lot of people go after school, and there have been instances of people being targeted in the square because of their uniform or what they're wearing.
So what is the demographic of the people who are targeting innocent people?
Probably say like, I would say like almost like older teenage boys probably, or like even a bit older, like older men as well.
I couldn't make too much of a comment because I've just been hearing from others. This is like three race on the line.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Right, that's all the questions we have for you ladies. Once again, very well done. And it's great seeing some younger people coming into the chamber and learning all about this process. Okay, we are deliberating on the 29th to 30th of May, and we'll take your considerations when we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, next we have number 913 submission from the Bay Nessian District's Community Development Trust, and I welcome Alice forward, please. Welcome, Alice. You have 10 minutes to speak and leave some time for questions. Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Oh, turn it on. Okay. Which button's that one? Oh, sorry. Fantastic. Thank you. Do I start it or do you start it? Fantastic. Okay. Kia ora. Good morning, councillors, Mayor and Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Alice Williamson, representing the Bayanesi and District Community Development Trust. The silver lining to COVID was the substantial increase in people walking and cycling. Today, the City to Sea Rail Trail is asking for your endorsement, your support in principle, but we aren't asking for funding. Our vision is to be a great trail within Manawatu's interconnecting off-trail network. Unfortunately, there is a missing link within the corridor of trails in and around our region. Because of this missing link, the region is missing out on significant economic opportunities through tourism. There are no trails between Sanson and Foxton, or between Foxton and Palmerston North. But with your endorsement, the City to Sea Rail Trail could be there, linking these areas. It is the missing piece of the active transport infrastructure within our region. With the completed trail between Fielding and Palmerston, the gorge to Palmerston, and the rail trail, all corridors would finally be interconnected. Excitingly, this would include a coast-to-coast option from Napier to Foxton, and in the future, from Wellington to Sanson. I ask that you envisage for a moment the Manawatu, where trails aren't just paths, but arteries pulsing with life, connecting communities and unlocking the full potential of our region. Indicate that a coast-to-coast ride will attract a far larger number of international cyclists and walkers to the Manawatu, assisting the region with its tourism goals. Consider for a moment why this matters by underscoring the point that was quoted by CEDA. The visitor spend contributed $583 million to the Manawatu region for the year ending September 2023. This was a 12.2% increase on 2022. 85% of these visitors were New Zealanders. This remarkable figure points to the immense economic potential of initiatives like the City to Sea Rail Trail in driving tourism and bolstering the region's economy. Imagine Fielding, Palmerston North, Foxton as hubs for cyclists, benefiting a wider range of businesses. Vibrant hub spikes offering half-day, full-day or overnight biking trips around the Manawatu region, with local, regional and international tourists economically benefiting the region's towns and villages as they enjoy all there is to offer in the wider Manawatu. CEDA state that the rail trail could generate strong local cyclist, walker and runner interest as it complements other cycleways. It could attract a far wider cohort of adventure cyclists, both young and old, wanting to experience a historical rail trail, along with a mix of unique and valuable links to places of interest across the region, attracting more domestic and international visitors. Our vision, however, requires action from you. We respectfully ask the Palmerston North City Council to take the next step. Please endorse the rail trail in your long-term plan on this round, so that we can lobby Waka Kotahi to appear on their RLTP. Waka Kotahi have said that, have clearly stated biking is good for the balance sheet. Making cycling a safer and more attractive transport choice is a key priority for them. So we need all councils, Horizons, Palmerston North, Manawatu and Horowhenua to endorse the trail before we can secure Waka Kotahi approval. So your support your support in principle, your endorsement, isn't just a stamp of approval, it's a commitment to our region's economic future and tourism growth. Your endorsement ensures the rail trail becomes a reality. Thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you, Alice. We have a question first from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions, actually. Thank you, Alice. The first one is, where are your efforts at the moment in terms of funding for the construction of the trail?
Okay, so we're at a bit of a stumbling block. We're at the chicken and egg situation. We cannot get funding from Waka Kotahi without the endorsement and support of all the councils and local iwi. So while we're waiting for that, we are in the throes right now of applying for funding so that we can work on the projects that we've got set up for ourselves. So those projects include establishing a structure at the Karere Corner where the landing is, some sort of structure at Bainesi and Rangiotu. Specifically, we're looking at putting some sort of train, or like you've got down here at Main Street with the wheels, something down there. And we are about to do our design plan from Rangiotu through to Bainesi for construction with working groups. So we need to do that. We recognise that we need to do that so that we can get the funding that we need. So we're just going to focus on doing those bits in the hope that we get the endorsement, because NZTA are key partners in this, because they have two areas of responsibility for this trail to get up and running.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, given that this trail is effectively outside the city boundaries,
yes, it is.
and we already have a trail to Longburn, how does our endorsement make any difference?
Well, my understanding is that without your endorsement, we lack one of the council's support, and without everybody's support, we can't go to Waka Kotahi.
So have they specifically stated that they want?
That's what I've been told.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and while I'd just like to add that while I recognise that this isn't in your zone, what I really would like to emphasise is how both Feilding, Foxton and Palmerston North will benefit from this trail. Financially, from a tourism point of view, this is a big baby in respect to what it can bring to the region long term. And a big player in that is this coast-to-coast ride.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alice, for bringing this to us. So just to confirm and follow on from those questions, so are you seeking endorsement from Horowhenua, Manawatu, and Palmerston North City as the three?
Yeah, and Horizons.
And
so
Horizons
all the long-term
overlay of that. Great,
yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. Just trying to understand kind of what you're seeking endorsement of. Is it a concept? Is there a document? Is there a firm thing that we're...
That's what nobody's been able to tell me. And
Okay.
I'll be quite upfront with you. Everyone I've asked, they've said you need to get the I understand that we need to get endorsement for Waka Kotahi, but nobody's actually been able to tell me exactly what that is, whether it's a document, whether it's something that I get each council to sign, whether it just shows up in your long-term plans. I'll be honest, I'm really not sure.
Thanks. I guess what I'm trying to ask is what we would be
Okay,
endorsing rather than what the form of the endorsement
sure,
is.
okay. You are supporting our plan to develop the rail trail. It doesn't include a financial commitment. It's simply, or at least I'm just putting across how I understand it. You are supporting in principle the idea of this being developed and the benefit that it would bring to the area.
Okay, great. That's helpful. And do you have any insight into the visitor spend that's being generated out of cycle tourism in other parts of the country?
Not right in front of me. I do know that both for Queenstown and Napier, who are two of the major players in the industry, the fact that they have a hub and they have developed a story around that hub and they have other interconnecting corridors, all of that has meant that they have It's like the stone in the pond, you know, if the ripple out effect, and it's been exponential.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll fit one more quick one in from Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very, very quick question from me. You talk about the coast-to-coast idea in terms of cycleway, but you haven't mentioned the Taurua District Council. Are you going to seek support from them in terms of endorsement as well?
It's no, actually, I must admit I hadn't considered that right at this point in time. Do you believe that's something I should do?
I can't answer that because we're in a hearing, but
Right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in, Alice, and look forward to seeing what appears in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, next we have submission number 961, councillors, and I'd like to welcome Greg from the Manawatu Kiwi Canoe Polo Club forward, please. Welcome, Greg. You have 10 minutes. I see your microphone's ready to go.
Oh, it is? Okay. Kia ora koutou. Ko Greg Sawyer aho. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in regard to my submission. I am the president of Central Canoe Polo Association based in the Manawatu and the treasurer of the Manawatu Kiwi Canoe Polo Club. This submission is to the long-term plan for our vision to develop a purpose-built canoe polo facility. Our sport of canoe polo, also known as kayak polo, has been played in the Manawatu since the 90s. We thank the city for their support of canoe polo, specifically as we play and work at the Hukawhiti Lagoon for the exercise and for the fun of the game. Over many years, we have had regular meetings with Sport Manawatu and city representatives with a specific focus on our vision for our purpose-built facility. Because of these meetings, our club has developed a facility concept outline that has been provided to Sport Manawatu and to the city. We have grand plans, yet achievable, for the sport to grow in the Manawatu with the dream of for a bigger purpose-built venue, one that can stand alone for us to share or for us to share with other codes such as Wakaama and triathletes. Currently, we use Freiburg Pool, Makino Pool, and the Hukawhiti Lagoon for our regular trainings, competitive leagues, social and community development events, and to host national tournaments. For over 25 years, we have been running a strong canoe polo program in the Manawatu for players ranging from beginners to world champion athletes that represent New Zealand overseas. We currently have 21 teams, 123 players in the National League tournament. Freiburg Pool has been very good for our beginner and intermediate players, specifically because it is covered and heated, and it also has storage for our canoe polo gear. Unfortunately, the 25-meter pool is about 10 meters shorter than a full-size court, and it is too narrow, so it is not used for the higher-level tournaments. Because of our use of indoor pools, even the small ones, our clubs will support any effort to develop and build a new 50-meter indoor pool. Such a pool would help us to deliver to our programs, particularly for Rangatahi and the Manawatu. In terms 2 and 3, our intermediate and secondary schools grades are held at Freiburg and Makino pools from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The late hours are not ideal for students, but we are very thankful to have the pool time. Indeed, Makino will be closed next Tuesday, so we must schedule more games at Freiburg to continue our school's grades. The Hukawhiti Lagoon is a fantastic venue for training and for playing games, mostly during the warmer months. We really enjoy our home courts, and people will often tell us at tournaments how nice it is to come to Palmy to play games at the lagoon because of the scenery and often with good weather, believe it or not. This year, we hosted 3 tournaments, the biggest being our annual Atahua Cup in early February, where we hosted 60 teams that came from all over New Zealand. It was a fantastic start to our canoe polo tournament season and a great draw for people to Palmerston North. We even have some of the local residents tell us how much they enjoy seeing us play our sport. We have a strong interest in helping to maintain the water quality of the lagoon, specifically because of our sport. The addition of the bore near the Manawatu Golf Course over 10 years ago was very helpful. More recently, the addition of the pump from the Manawatu River at the other end of the lagoon has been helpful in maintaining water levels after the Eketuna earthquake of 2014, when the water levels dropped and stayed low for many years. The water level has stabilized to just over 900 millimeters for most of the year. However, during droughts, the water level still drops, and the lagoon is currently less than 900 millimeters relative to the gauge, whoever has the gauge on that. The biannual spraying of weeds at the lagoon has been valuable for control of weeds to the benefit of all users of the lagoon. Graham Lavin at the Palmerston North Canoe Club has led this effort over many years, perhaps decades, initially for the benefit of the longboaters that are based out of the chalet. However, we understand that he has retired from this work at the end of 2023. Therefore, our clubs need to work with the city on plans on how to control the weeds in the future. Our facility concept outline has been updated and is now ready for a needs assessment study. What do we want to or need with a new facility? Ideally, we want to create a venue with 4 full-size courts in order to easily host multiple tournaments in the Manawatu. This would equal the number of courts that were built at the Hastings Sports Complex in 2019. Christchurch is close to setting up 2 more courts to have 4 courts at Lake Rotokahatu near the airport. It would be great to have 4 courts at a purpose-built venue so that we can host an international tournament. Even more courts would be ideal. However, a 4-court venue would be a wonderful way to host many local competitions, especially for schools grades, and to provide quality training time for all of our athletes. Currently, for our annual Atahua Cup, we set up a 4th court at the lagoon, which allows us to host 60 teams during the 2 days. We are looking at maybe adding a 5th temporary court so that we can host a few more teams and have all the polo done during the daytime hours. Therefore, we plan and work toward the future with 4-court purpose-built facility in the Manawatu. Our 3 clubs within the Manawatu greatly support this effort. These clubs are the Palmerston North Canoe Club with 3 National League teams, the Manawatu Kiwi Canoe Polo Club with 21 National League teams, and the Central Canoe Polo Association that works with all the clubs in the region from Wellington to New Plymouth. I appreciate the Council's time in considering our vision for a top-class canoe polo facility in the Manawatu. We hope that you will support our FCO through a needs assessment and to keep our plans in the long-term plan. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui, Greg.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have a question from Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, guys. Just to give me a bit of better understanding, what size of land area are we talking about for 4 full-time, full-size courts as well as a function facility?
Great question. Basically, to get 4 courts in a specific area, 1 hectare would do it. But of course, if you want to add the parking and other things around that, ablution blocks and all that, I mean, ideally, I would start with 2 hectare piece of land,
Sure.
or even a lake, someplace that we could actually start working around and doing stuff with. We're at the lagoon because it's a reserve we can use, but ideally we can't build there, and so we need to be thinking of the future and where we can play. So 1 hectare we can get by with, 2 would be ideal.
For sure.
Just for our purposes, we'd love to share that space with somebody else. if possible.
Like Waka Armour and...
Oh, triathletes, whoever else might be able to use the space.
Okay. Last question, Mr. Chair. Have you brought this proposal or anything to the council up until now?
Not a specific FCO. We've been guided by Anne-Marie to have an FCO and the Sport 102 to have this FCO so that we can then go to the needs assessment. We're starting to understand the whole process. I've been talking to the council for almost 10 years, coming to make sure we're part of the long-term plan. But now I understand we have to have this FCO, and then now we can ask for a needs assessment or some help with getting the needs assessment done. So
Sure.
this is the first time we've presented this.
Wonderful. Thanks for your submission. All the best. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm interested, would a facility like this be a staffed facility operationally or more of a higher venue situation? How would you imagine it, the operating would?
That's a great question. So we've looked at the, from a health and safety perspective, you wouldn't want to just have a body of water sitting there that's not managed in some way. The advantage of the reserve at the lagoon is that basically it's not our problem to a certain extent, but we do want to make sure we don't encourage people to do things they shouldn't do. So what they do in Hawke's Bay at the Hastings facility, they have a big fence around it, and they do have gates that are managed somehow. They have code access or something like that. I'm not sure. And the other thing with their facility is they actually had to build it such that it's only 1.5 meters deep. So potentially if somebody fell in, they could actually stand up and crawl out. And so there's all these aspects of it. We'd have to look at their facility and think, what could we do? But if it was a lake, if we had a lake situation, we would have to control access to the lake so that only people that are authorized could be in there to potentially make sure that nothing happens to them. Yeah. So managing it would be the challenge. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Sure.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks both. Just recalling a submission that I was scanning through the other day to the long-term plan that did express some concerns from a neighbor around the lagoon there. I just wondered what your sense is of kind of the state of social license around continued use of the lagoon space, and how much of your desire for a new facility is kind of risk mitigation around social license at Hokiwhiti Lagoon, and how much of it's around space.
Yeah, it's a curious question. So social license, I mean, we want to be good neighbors. We go out of our way to make sure we're good neighbors. Every once in a while, we just finished our busiest part of our season, and so now only 1/3 of us are still playing down there. But every once in a while, somebody notices something loud, and so they complain about it. And so we weigh that. We also have people telling us when something's going wrong down there, and I'll dash down there to help sort some situation. So we want to keep being good neighbors. I think of myself as, in Kaitiake, down there to help sort things. But in order to grow the sport, we need a bigger venue. And so we don't see building it down there as the future, but we'll always have a footprint there, I think. I don't see how we could ever move on totally.
Cool, thanks for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in, gentlemen. That's all we have time for. And we're having deliberations on the 29th, 30th of May, and look forward to seeing what we can come up with in the future for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, next we have submission number 961. No, we don't. 982. And I'll pull Perry forward, please. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. I pushed the red button.
You're all live. You're ready to go. No, you just switched off. Just press the button again.
Okay,
Here we
red
go.
light's on. All right, thank you. Good morning, Morena. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Much of what I want to say, I've spoke to you before about. I find myself here again. My biggest concern is capital value rating, and the basis that we are doing it now, which is land value. We need to move in that direction. The reason is fairness. Fairness. This is supposed to be a trait. I do social surveys of New Zealanders that is a particularly characteristic of Kiwi culture. I do appreciate the council has finally recognized that this is a significant issue. It seems like it's been years that you've talked about it and haven't done anything, all right? However, your preferred option, in quotes, 70% land, 30% capital, is a very weak compromise. Surely that's evident. All right, at least 50-50 if you have to do something like that. All right, it looks like an attempt to largely avoid the issue. All right, your document says that some councils use land value, some use capital value. Okay, but a better word would be most councils use capital value. I've dug up a Productivity Commission report from 2019 on rating, and that tells me that at that point, 71% of councils in New Zealand were using capital value. All right, and that's up, in fact, from 2007 when 51% used capital value. All right, Palmerston North seems to be the only metropolitan council that is still using land value. When you look at the ones still using land value, they seem to be smaller places in terms of population and more rural. All right. Why are we so resistant to this? What is it about us compared to all these other urban councils? When we want to be a big city, well, let's be a big city. All right. Ask yourself why rates among urban residents, and that's what I'm talking about, vary. It's certainly not by the amount or character of the services you receive. Remember, GST, the logic of GST on rates is because it's a fee for service. All right, but it doesn't vary by the fact that some people pay enormously more rates than others. All right, so if it's not that, the only logical explanation must be that it's some kind of attempt to attach it to ability to pay, like the logic of graduated income tax. All right, and now that's not a perfect measure of ability to pay, but how anyone can rationally argue that land value, which is only part of the valuation, is a fairer basis than capital value escapes logic. You'd get a lot of red ink on a university essay if you try to make that argument. When a person buys a residential property, it's the total cost, effectively the capital value, that's the issue. Yes, if you're going to make people angry if you go to capital value, because some people who have benefited from this forever and a day are going to have to pay more. Please remind them that they have been benefiting from this and have in effect been subsidized by other people, probably mostly with older, smaller properties, but on more traditional sized sections, all right? Remind them of that, and take some years to transition. How did all these other councils make the transition, And your document says there's a problem with commercial and land value or industrial land. Okay, fair enough. But treat them, I believe you can treat them differently. I've been reading this document from the Productivity Commission. It sounds like there's ways of treating them differently. But please address the inequality of urban residential rates. I still got 6 minutes. All right, I'm also concerned about the way housing intensification is likely to go in this place, if I read the documents right. All right, I'm concerned about it when it's well removed from the central business area in areas that are mostly single-family detached homes that have some semblance of a yard. There is a place for higher density housing. I'm not arguing against that. But to me, the place is in or near the central city, and it's done at scale, and it's done with careful planning, not in a itsy-bitsy backyard here or backyard there, in between places with trees and green space, all right? When I have questioned this, I'm always told that we have to stop sprawl. Fair enough. I agree that that's an environmental problem. But what is the council actually doing about that? The council supports and facilitates sprawl. Are there not developments in various stages in every direction from the center of the city going on right now? And you support lifestyle blocks, which I'm not against lifestyle blocks. I almost bought one once, but I decided a quarter acre was enough to take care of. But they often occupy good land, and certainly they force the residents, who would be mostly urban workers, to drive a lot. All right. I grew up in the city of Chicago in a dense circumstance. All right. I very much appreciate, having lived most of my adult life here, having a bit of space around me, having a yard where my kids were safe and private to play, having a yard where I could grow some of my food, having a compost pile that deals with the food waste the city is, very concerned about and has other submissions going on about. All right. Having a laundry line that even gets some sun in the wintertime, so I don't have to waste electricity on a dryer. All right, these are good things. These are green things. I don't know how you resolve green problem with sprawl and green problem, having a bit of a yard, but you've got to deal with that issue, So, all I want to say in the end, I've still got 4 minutes, is that, there's a number of identified issues with intensification. One is the water runoff. I'm sure you're well aware of that. You're taking away permeable land with trees and vegetation that absorb these horrible, intense rainfalls that we're getting more and more. There's the issue of access of fire service vehicles. I've read in Auckland that they've had problems with that in places. There's issues of privacy and sunlight. It's a nightmare scenario for me to imagine the house next to me having 3 or 4 townhouses that are 3 stories with 4 or 5 or 6 cars on the street, because, you don't have to build, I'm told you don't have to provide off-street parking for these developers. That's what the planners told me here a couple of years ago. But if you think people will give up their cars because they live in dense circumstances, that's naive. We live in the second most highest density of private motor vehicles per capita in the world. If you look for these lists, you'll discover we're in a race with the United States for the top position. All right, more than Australia, more than Canada. People find it useful to own a car. I've ridden a bike to work for the last 4 decades at Massey, but I still have a car. It's good for the groceries. It's good to go out at night and feel safe. My wife is getting, older. I'm getting older. We can't walk to a bus stop or ride a bicycle. I do, but she couldn't possibly do that. These are all issues. So if the council can't really force developers to have off-street parking, can you not give them some positive incentive if they do? Do something for them that they would appreciate, in the way of planning permissions. Must be some way of doing that. All right. What I'm worried about is intensification, given that map you put out about a year or 2 ago, showing the yellow zones where it was going to be, is that many of those are single-family home areas, all right? All right, it's going to be haphazard. It's for the benefit of small-scale developers, not things done at scale. All right, I got 2 minutes left. Okay. It's going to be an old house here with some trees in a yard, and then next door, 3 or 4 3-story townhouses with 4 or 5 cars on the street. All right, it's haphazard. It's what infill now is doing, but magnified many times over. Better to have a big development near the center of the city, you know, carefully planned. That's one of the problems with housing, I think, in this country. And I'm a social scientist that has spent much of his life worrying about environmental and urban issues. All right, you know, why can't we build housing subdivisions to scale? You know, one developer doesn't just put the streets in like down by me at the Hokovitu, what was the Hokovitu campus, but actually builds the houses as well. 6 months later, you got a whole subdivision with a couple hundred houses. The way it's going, it'll be 10 years before that Hokovitu development is filled with houses, you know. So why do we do it that way? Anyway, thank you for listening to me. Happy to give you a minute for my question.
We have a couple of questions. Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, thank you. Reading your submission, it's very clear, and as you said, you want to go to capital value. Did you consider how it will affect people in some areas at either end of the scale, particularly people with larger sections or small sections with expensive houses, how the rates would affect them?
I have a house on a flat section that's almost a quarter of an acre.
Yeah.
My neighbor has built a giant house next to me on the same size section. That one's $2 million. Mine's valued at about 800 and some thousand. Her rates are effectively the same as mine because the sections are virtually the same in the same place. How is that fair?
Well, what about the other end of it, where people...
What I see is, forgive me, but I don't have much time. Forgive me, but most of the ones I see are McMansions on small sections who have much higher capital valuations, but lower land valuations because they're on 400 or 500 square meters instead of 800-900 square meters. That's what I see. I see most of the older houses are the ones on the bigger sections. Yep. And we saw from a couple of years ago with some of the submissions people made that people have a lot of these older houses that they can't even subdivide if they wanted to, the way the house is positioned. They'd have to destroy the house. You know, that's what I see. It's mostly the McMansions that are going to have to pay more. But I could be wrong. Has anybody done a serious study of that?
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for coming in and speaking.
All right. Thank you.
Very good. Next, we move online to Sherilyn O'Hara, and that, Councillor, is number 1090. Can you hear us, Sherilyn?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 10 minutes, and by all means, leave some time for questions.
Cool. Hey, look, I'll keep it short. Submissions there, I believe you've all seen that. Firstly, thank you for questioning the last speaker around that, because I own a smaller lifestyle section, and I am concerned about the new proposed way that we go for rates. Now, we own a small lifestyle section. We have water catchment, water tanks, our own septic, and yet our rates are going to increase substantially, but we're going to get no benefit from it. That to me is a concern, because we have additional tanks that we use for our gardens. We grow a lot of vegetables and fruit on our land. We have compost that we feed that. We recycle as much as we possibly can. We don't have any rubbish collection, recycling collection. So what benefit are we getting from these proposed rates increases? I think there needs to be some sort of a structure where those smaller lifestyle sections on the outskirts of town are thought about and considered in this. In terms of the transport side of things, look, we used to use buses when we lived in town. I lived in London for a couple of years. We used a lot of transport over there, and I believe if it was done right, more people would use it and utilise it. However, it's not serviceable for the likes of myself, who's only Stony Creek Road. We're not a long way out of town. Things that they did in the UK and other places in the world is the likes of a park and ride. So on the outskirts of town, they would have a parking facility. You would park there, and the buses would then transport you from there into town. This could be something that we could look at. We've got a lot of vacant land just on the outskirts of town that we could potentially utilise. This would also mean less cars in town. From there, I mean, you can put some smaller park and rides in town where people could not so much drive their cars to, but bike to. park their bikes, hop on the buses, and then utilise a shorter service for time saving. I'm definitely not against the use of transport. I just think we need to use it. Another big concern of mine would be around the wasteful spending. So when we look at Featherston Street, that's horrendous at the moment. And I know someone spoke about this earlier, but it is something that people were very, very against. But we continue to go ahead with it. And now I tried to pick my child up from daycare last night, and there was maybe a K worth of traffic. What was the intention there? Because to me, it almost seems like we're intending to delay traffic for the purpose of people using the buses. Well, that's great, but it doesn't always work in an environment that we're in currently. A lot of money's been spent on this, and it really hasn't been done correctly. And I think more thought needs to go into that before we continue down that path. Other than that, look, I think you've read my submission. I'm happy to answer questions where I can, but I'm just a general public here, so I'll try and answer where I can.
Thank you, Sheridan. I'm afraid there is no questions for you, but oh, sorry, we have one just come in. Councillor Naylor, thank you.
Thank you, Sheridan, for your submission. You've written in your submission that you think we should focus on needs, not wants. You've given the example of Featherston Street. Are there any other areas that are in our long-term plan that you consider are wants rather than needs?
Look, I'll be honest, I haven't gone into detail with it. With two young kids, it makes it tough at times to try and sit down and actually read through everything in detail. Needs versus wants. What I'm meaning there is Featherston really a need right now, or is that more of a want? Do we want to just move forward like the rest of the world is trying to with these 15-minute cities and this sort of thing? Is it really a need right now when economic times are tough and that a lot of us are struggling out there in the world? Do we really need to spend that money, which ultimately puts prices up for everyone? Do we need to go to a fleet of electric buses that cost an extortionate amount more than a diesel bus right now in the city? While I think it's beneficial in the long term, is it needed right now when time is tough and money is scarce?
Thank you. Just one follow-up question. You've also said that you think rates need to stay stable. I'm just wondering what level of increase you think would be reasonable.
I think proportion, you've spoke about it. It's a hard ask. I don't really know the answer on that because, as the previous speaker highlighted, the house next door to him is paying the same amount with a much sizable house. So I don't know the correct answer to that. What I mean by my statement was people are really struggling at the moment. Myself and my wife have good jobs, but we are still struggling at the moment. Prices are going up everywhere except for our paycheck, and it's getting harder and harder to survive week to week.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Isabella.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheridan. I've got a two-part question, and it's just on your view on cycleways. Just really interested if you were aware that Featherston Street project was 100% externally funded, and if you're aware of our urban cycleways master plan, and if so, what's your view on cycleways and pedestrian improvements in the future if they aren't ratepayer funded? Do you have a view on that?
Yes, I was aware that it was externally funded. My thought with that would be, was it externally funded by someone who had too much input in the design? Because the design doesn't work. I'm all for cycleways. I've got two young kids that I would love to be able to drop off at a point and have them cycle the rest of the way to school like I did when I was a child. But I also don't think we have a massive need for it. We have wide roads. I cycled all of my younger generation, all of my younger age. I continue to cycle now where I can, but living outside of town, like I say, a park and ride would be perfect. I could cycle from a point into town with my kids, and yes, I would like improvements in the use of cycle lanes, but it's got to be done in a way that is non-intrusive to the moving traffic, because as I encountered, when we had the cycle lane down Pioneer Highway built, cars were crashing into those little things that you put on the side of the road and then bouncing out into the lane of traffic, which was collecting other cars. I saw a cyclist try and avoid something that was on the road, clip one of those little pieces that were on the side of the road there, and fall into the lanes of moving traffic, which forced me to swerve into the other side and almost make contact with another car. We've got to be smart how we do this for safety reasons.
Thank you. And I just had one other follow-up one, which was that we held some public co-design sessions for Featherston Street. Is that something that you'd be interested in attending in the future if we held more, so you could have more direct input into how these things are designed?
Look, I've tried to attend a couple of the meetings that we've had in the past for various things. It all comes down to timing. When you've got 2 young children, it makes it very hard to get there immediately after work, or around school pickups, drop-offs, that sort of thing. But yes, it is something that I'd like to attend and something that I do plan on attending.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks very much.
We move online to Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Sheridan. Just one question. You talked about a park and ride. Whereabouts do you think that should be?
Well, you know the plan a lot better than I do, but surely something on the outskirts in Napier Road. I know where we've just changed where the retirement villages have been done, where the old McPhersons were. Would it not be something around that area that we could get some land, develop it into a decent parking facility, have a security guard present so that we don't have vandals or anything going in there during the day? And from there, it's pretty much a straight line into work. So people could bike. There's nice wide roads the whole way down there. You could bike from that area. You could catch a bus, which is just more like your tram, even, straight in, straight out. Rangitikei line on the outskirts, there's plenty of bare land. I know it's floodland, so we'd have to think about that. But there's something that we could do there, straight into the middle of the town. Once you're in the middle of town, everything's pretty accessible. So you could then bike, walk, whatever it might be. And that would be something that I'd be prepared to do working on Broadway.
Thanks, Sheridan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheridan. That's all we have for you today. Thank you very much for your submission and your time. And 29th, 30th of May, we're making deliberations and we're taking into consideration your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Next, we move to submission number 1108, and I'd like Anne Atkinson to come forward, please. Good morning, Anne. You have 10 minutes to speak, and by all means, leave some time for questions.
So, good morning all, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm fairly new to this and I'm not sure if I've understood the proper process, but however, they said we want to listen to you, and lots of people have given me their views, although these basically are my submission as such, but it covers a whole lot of different things. So firstly, I'm a pensioner, so I cannot afford things. Excuse me, when we were younger, we went without, or we saved up for whatever we wanted. We borrowed only to buy a house. But of course, we don't live in that kind of situation nowadays. We also recycled or repurposed things. So that's the basis for my submissions. So needs, not wants. Somebody else has already mentioned that, or the wants would be nice. So, and for me, a priority is to maintain what we've got, because if we let that slide, or you let that slide on our behalf, we've then got to spend extra money to fix whatever it was that we weren't maintaining in the first place. So one of the most mentioned things that people said to me was artworks. Now, nobody else has mentioned that so far, but lots of people, including me, think that we don't really need any new statues because we've already got plenty, and also they're not really necessary. So that's all I've got to say about that one. It makes sense to improve or adapt while you're strengthening or maintaining buildings, etc. So, and my understanding, I mean, I know there are more, but in the long-term plan, the Pacifica and the Te Patiki and the Central Library in particular have been mentioned. So I think that, yes, you have plans to not just strengthen them, but also to make them more usable or more adaptable, or whatever the word is. So I think that that's a good thing to do, and as I said, it makes sense to do that while you're fixing the roof, for example, to do what comes underneath that at the same time, especially if you've got the same kind of work people who are actually doing the job. The nice to haves, I've put the Awapuni Library in the that category. I know it's supposed to be a community centre as well, which is good, but in the meantime, it's not really necessary, so I'd ask you to use the buildings in the meantime for things and sort of put it on the back burner. I know it's a 10-year plan, so I found it very difficult to think now what should not be in there at all, as opposed to what, yes, should be there and where should it go. And somebody else has mentioned time. I also had difficulty, and unfortunately I didn't actually get to see the consultation document until last night. So I was away in the first place. I came into the City Council to get documentation, etc., as they said you could get, and at that stage there wasn't. There was just the submission forms. So I did my submissions on that. I did come along to your expo, and I found that very helpful and got a few answers for some questions that I had. Right, so the other thing, Te Motu Poutua, while I can see that it's very would be beneficial for the city, but again, it's not necessary, but I know, because I don't know all the background into everything, I didn't have all the information, etc. But yes, I agree that it's something that would be beneficial, but it's a nice to have. But I understand that you are looking at partnership funding, etc. So, of course, I'm not party to what sort of percentages is the Rangatane going to provide it, and what sort we as ratepayers and you as councillors on our behalf going to spend. Recycling I mentioned as well, and repurposing. For the food and green waste, obviously it doesn't matter what you do, you've still got a cost. For us personally, we compost, so the food waste wouldn't be a problem for us, but we do pay for the green, you know, well, as you know, the City Council has a facility where you can take your green waste to, and you pay for the privilege of dropping it off. But of course it's not wasted totally, because I understand that that then is converted into compost, which is sold. So therefore it's another reason for getting green waste. But of course, like everything else, where you get people who pollute what you've actually, you know, putting rubbish in clothing bins and things which have now been removed for that reason. It still happens at places that are left off. You would have to look at where could we leave bins for clothing, for example, to be left to be recycled, because that's going in the landfill, which is part of what we're all about. Inorganic, I've mentioned a suggestion for that, and soft plastics is another thing which we used to have, but perhaps we could try to you could try to reintroduce those with bins maybe in supermarkets or somewhere. Again, unfortunately, we live in a society where people think it's great to vandalise or especially on things that are good. So we'd have to be careful where we place those, the same as the rubbish bins. I've noticed sometimes rubbish bins are not emptied, so if you're putting extra rubbish bins out and about the place, yes, that's good, but please make sure they're emptied. Other matters which I didn't really go to, as I said, I didn't have time to really investigate but of real concern is the expansion of the city, and this has been mentioned with housing, etc. And I know you're all not silly and everything, so you realise that you have to pay for infrastructure and get everything right. Major water problems, make sure, again, this comes under maintaining what we have. And, well, we've seen Wellington, for example, has been not washed out exactly, but they've got burst water pipes. I know you've been, well, previous councils as well, have been maintaining, so continue the maintenance. And also having more people, I think we've perhaps too many people in Palmerston North already, so building extra houses and that sort of thing to invite people to come in is perhaps a want rather than a need. And capping it all off, basically, we need to look after what we have for the people that we have. We're as I said, people who are here already and, you know, not being selfish, but maintaining what we have, I think, is a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. We have Councillor Johnson first up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Anne, for coming in and talking to your submission. What is it, do you think, that makes the things that you've asked for needs, but the things that other people have asked us for wants?
I tried to look at the whole lot, but again, like I said, I could see the green waste, for example, that would benefit us. Well, maybe not, because the rates increase might you take that out, but there are people who don't have all the green bushes and things and hedges, etc., that we do on our property, so they may not need that. But again, as you say, some things that I think are needs and not wants, and I guess the Awapuni Library might sort of come into that category.
Okay, let's take that one as an example. So we've had groups from Awapuni coming in telling us that that's something that they need. So what I'm trying to challenge you with is, we have a lot of people coming in saying that what they are asking for is a need, in the same way that your list of things that you're asking for you think are needs. But how would you distinguish between what you need and what another group needs? Because it seems to me that it's something that you want is a need, but something that someone else wants is a want.
I get where you're coming from, but I tried to look at it from not just my point of view, but as I said, it was because we want to hear what you have to say, because I tried to look at it from a general point of view. What would a resident of Palmerston North, wherever they were living, sort of want fixed? I mean, the roads and the leaves on the thing and all those minor things, but we're looking at the major works. And I'm aware that it's a 10-year plan and that we are looking to the future as well. And as I said, it's certainly a lot different world from when I was growing up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for coming in and sharing your views. You did very well in those views of your friends. Making deliberations on the 29th, 30th of May, and we'll take your views into consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillors, next we have submission number 1118, and welcome Jeff Watson to the microphone, please. Good morning, Jeff. Welcome.
Good morning.
10 minutes to speak, and by all means leave some time for some questions. Your microphone's live. You ready to go?
Thank you very much. The main thing I would like to talk about today is my support for the stated commitment in the plan on the City Library and the wider Arts and Heritage Plan to collect and protect community stories through the city archives. I'm very pleased to see that this is mentioned explicitly. I think it's a very important element of the wider goal that myself and a number of other people involved as local historians have in the telling of our local histories, and indeed training the next generation of historians to tell our local stories. And I would like to acknowledge the support of the Palmerston North City Council in the wider history and heritage space, particularly the support for the City at the Centre publication, which I was lucky enough to be involved in, and events like the Local Heritage Month, which I think give a really important role in connecting the community with their local history through talks and tours. The Aotearoa New Zealand history curriculum is really, I think, a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we have to use research based on our archives to tell our younger people their stories of where they live. So they are a real foundation for, I think, the working with local schools, which is starting to happen, so that they have the opportunity to learn about their local history and a place where they can go and read about it. And that's where I'd also like to express my support for Manawatu Heritage. This is a fantastic resource. There's really no better time to be a local historian now because of the amount we have readily available to us on papers past and digitised places like Manawatu Heritage. But the archives in particular, and I'm thinking of the Ian Matheson Community Archives as well as the Council Archives, they are the point of difference for Palmerston North. There's no better place to be a local historian than Palmerston North. And there is something, and I would like to acknowledge the role of the Council, and indeed I would like to acknowledge the role of the press, the Manawatu Standard, and Janine Rankin, George Haney, and a long line of reporters in recording our local history. We are uniquely fortunate here. And one of the areas we're also lucky is that we've got a number of people, particularly coming through Massey University, who use the archives for their own studies. So just last year, Ike Heafy did his master's thesis on the history of Coleman Moor and how it evolved from a sort of essentially public or thoroughfare to a public gathering place into sort of mixed place. So we have people like Ike, Josh Reed, currently looking at the Manawatu flax trade for his doctoral thesis, and Susie Katovich's recent thesis on the Vietnam War protests in Palmerston North is now particularly useful to school children who are looking at protest, because her thesis again used the local archival records, did some interviews, and so that's something that's been of ongoing benefit. We've got a student at the moment, Amos Knorr, who's looking at the history of table tennis in New Zealand, and a lot of that will focus on Manawatu, which was the second provincial association set up. So the recording of our local histories is something that's, I think, increasingly important as time goes on. So it's very good to see that commitment to collecting and protecting stories through the city archives. Certainly it would be good if the issue of safe, effective and easily accessible storage could be addressed as a matter of priority, because this is really the foundation for people involved in local history to do their work, and it will be of lasting benefit not only now but to future generations. So I'd like to thank the councillors for their work and support in that area, and express my support for the commitment to city archives noted in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. history has certainly been a big part of my life, and that interest was sparked by older family members who have now passed, and often think, very, very lucky that I did have that interest and learnt the things I learnt. History, whether it's good or bad, has a part in society, and it's a shame looking around the world that we don't learn more from these bad things in history. There are no questions. Thank you very much for coming in, and I share your views. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, ladies and gentlemen, we have submission number 994, and I'd like to welcome Zanes forward, please. Welcome, your microphone's live, you have 10 minutes to speak, but by all means leave some time for questions. Thank you.
Is it on now?
Yep, you all go.
Cool. Kia ora, Mayor, City Council and everyone. My name is Angela Tamarai. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I've been here in Palmerston North for most of my life, and changes I have seen with the roads, for example, is just unnecessary, especially this year. As a mom, I know how dangerous, that streets can be. And it's just outside school, so one of the roads that I go to often is Featherston Street to pick up my daughter from school, especially coming from my work at Just Silts. And there's an accident that happened last year. So as the car was coming up from, I think, must have been that year, not that big car park, outside Torpedo in March 10. A truck came up behind and literally smashed the front of the car. So it was like the right side of the car, like where the window was of the truck, of the car driver, it smashed into it, and there was a boy sitting next to him, and they were like, it was a massive shock for both of them, especially the 10-year-old boy. And as everyone turned around to see what happened, I called that on, and as well as with other friends. But yeah, it's like if the road had been a little bit wider, that would not have happened. They could have gone around, around the vehicle, and would have kept going. That would not have happened then. Thankfully, they were not hurt. But, the car was pretty much distorted. They had to be taken away. And the family were coming from another town to here for the car to be smashed. This is not okay. And I know how much people are enraged about, the whole, the way that Featherston Street has been like with the poles and things like that. And also, you know, like in the middle of the, now, it's in the middle of the turning lane, you know, as you go up to, up to Ringatiki. And so, you know, like, as the traffic lights go on, and for the pedestrians, so you know it's like it's getting a bit dangerous because you know like you go if you want to go up, and then there's like you know because it's like both left and you know the left turn and the right, the straight turn. So if they have a light that they say they can go, and say like, say it was just like the green light for just keep going, but then if someone who's going left, and they had to wait for the people to cross the line, this is dangerous. Like, you know, it's dangerous for them, and it's dangerous for, you know, the people, because they don't want to they don't want to get caught up, like, they don't want to hit someone, and the person doesn't want to get hit, obviously. So, it's not safe. And the bus in the middle of the road, it's just like, it's unsafe. I mean, it's unsafe, could have vehicles held back, who needs to go and pick up the kids, such as myself, and they can't because the bus is there, and also other vehicles coming in through. So like, they could easily crash into other vehicles. That's another thing. I love Palmy. Like, I really love Palmy, but the way Featherston Street is right now, it's just not okay. Also the buses. Like, really, why do they have to be electrical buses? Why can't they just use diesel buses? I heard from a friend that one of the buses got stuck up at the Milson line. And as I used these buses before, last year, I mean, I don't know now, but as a mother, I can feel for other mothers who have to use the buses that may have struggles as to how much time it takes to get their appointments, especially. You know, time is very important. I had appointments that I had to go to. So when, you know, the electric bus suddenly stops, and depending on how long it takes to, you know, be good again, it takes into account the time that it takes from the person. Yeah.
Thank you, Zanes, for your views and for coming in and voicing your submission. And we're having deliberations on the 29th, 30th of May. And, sorry, popped in there, Councillor Johnson.
Been there for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Zane, for your submission. In your written submission, you gave a list of projects that you wanted us to cancel, and it seemed like they were all the active transport things around shared walking and cycle pathways, cycleways, streets for people, and so on and so forth. So, are you not supporting any kind of active transport at all in the city?
It just help the place, like, you know, for Featherston Street, like, because there's like a whole lot of vehicles coming through, and it's like, this is like a busy street.
Yeah, so these programs are not concerned with Featherston Street at all?
It just depends. It depends on, like, you know, how they are program to, work with other vehicles, like,
I'm just trying to, I hear what you've had to say about Featherston Street, but I'm just trying to understand, in regards to the other programs that we've got in the plan for walking and cycleway improvements, do you not support any of those? Or because you've suggested that we cut them all. So are you thinking that we don't need to do any cycleways at all in the city?
in a minimum of like keeping them safe.
Who are we keeping safe there?
To keep people safe, like, people who need to cross, the pedestrians.
So pedestrian safety you would support?
And, also vehicle safety, because, like what happens, like,
Okay, so you support pedestrian safety and vehicle safety, but not cycle safety. Is that a fair summary?
Well, actually, like I support them as well, but it's just like in a way that it depends on how it's set out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in, and that concludes session 6 for this morning, and we will break now for morning tea. There's morning tea out in the link span if you'd like a drink, and we will be back here in the chamber at 11 o'clock for a start just after. Thank you.
Good.
Mr. Chair, what time are we back here?
11. number 1182, the West Te Wanaka Road Group. Neil and Grant.
History, and it has been very difficult to sum up this in just 10 minutes. The close link between the LTP and Wanaka Road. Councillors, can I ask you please, how many have read and understand section 21 of the district plan? Councillors, can I also ask you how many understand that there is an Environment Court consent order for the Te Wanaka Road dated the 1st of October 2020, signed by Judge Dwyer? In 2020, RMA commissioners found in favour of the West Side residents as an affected party in the Kiki Whenua development that the West Side be included in the provision going forward. This was further backed up by Council making commitments to my community in writing through an Environment Court mediation and a consent order dated the 1st of October 2020, signed by Judge Dwyer. I repeat, there is a consent order dated the 1st of October 2020, signed by Judge Dwyer. I'm upset about the way my community continues to be treated because there is not any clearly outlined plan to provide my community with the confidence the council will follow through on their agreement. We began the process in 2008, 16 years ago. After 16 years of promises, next year, next year, next year, this has become ridiculous. Race supports development of the west side of Te Wanaka Road, and the west side support development of the east side of Te Wanaka Road. After all, if you have read and understand section 21 of the district plan and the Environment Court consent order, you will see why Part A of Kiki Whenua east side and Part B of Kiki Whenua west side of Te Wanaka Road must be dealt with together. And it makes economic and practical sense to do so. It is not good enough for PNCC to keep putting forward plan changes without the provision for services. We would expect to see this attended to urgently in the long-term plan, and in particular in the short-term 3-year cycle. I have in writing from council officers on the 6th of April 2023 that money has been set aside for the intersection upgrade at the corner of Te Wanaka Road and State Highway 56. I'm unclear if this is included in the current plan or if it is another council smokescreen. It is not good enough for council to continue blaming NZTA for holding up development over intersection upgrades and speed limit approval. If NZTA was to know that council had budgeted infrastructure right now, then I would suggest that there would be a stronger case for NZTA to work with the council because you're actually showing that you're actually doing something. In an email dated the 6th of April 2023, just over a year ago, and I quote, A new water main is planned for construction in the 24-25 budget. I want to ensure that this new water main is in fact budgeted and has the appropriate engineering reports, service provisions to enable a finished east and west Te Wanaka Road. This will also open up area for the next stages of Kakatanga, which is quite sensible. I have high hopes that decision makers will do the right thing and back their commitments. We are willing and happy to work with you. Grant and I can answer any questions that you may have of us.
Thank you, gentlemen. We don't have any, we do, coming in thick and fast. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your proposal and submission today. Can I just grab onto the water main comments at the end there? You have a concern that we haven't budgeted for it, or do you have a proposal of how much we might want to
I had an email sent by a council official stating that this was the case.
That this was the case of?
Of the water main being budgeted in the 24-25 budget. That was in 2023.
Wonderful. And so you're submitting today just to make sure that we've got the right allocation of funding for that particular item?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Neil and Grant. Just one of the things we're grappling with in this long-term plan is around the cost of growth and how we fit that into a budget. And one of the proposals that we're considering is starting to fund growth through off-balance sheet borrowing rather than directly through council rates and those mechanisms. And just wondered, from your perspective, do you have a view around if either of those are preferable to the other?
Yeah, probably in my field, that one. I was at a recent meeting with council just over the road there talking about development funding, and they did say that this was a project that would probably be on borrowed money. At that stage, I had a chat with a few people afterwards, and we wondered where all the money that developers pay in development contributions actually goes. If it's supposedly earmarked for the supply of services for new development. But at the end of the day, if you have to borrow money to do the services and whatever down at Te Wanaka Road, I can't see that that's a major issue either, looking at the income council will gain from the sections and the development contributions in that area. It should be relatively easy to fund through any sort of source, especially if the development funds go to $45,000 a section times 230 odd sections. It's pretty good income.
Thank you. And that kind of raises my second question as well in a way, but just from a philosophical point of view, are you comfortable with the idea that growth pays its own way, or do you think that there should be some wider community subsidy for growth?
Well, generally, I think growth does pay its own way. That's what development contributions are all about. Even with internal, infill housing, I believe those fees are going up slightly, but that's probably 10 or 11 grand a section. And most cases for infill housing, council don't have to spend any money because we also have infill, water supply, water retention on property and all those sorts of costs.
Yeah, thanks. I guess what I'm trying to get at is whether that notion sits comfortably with you.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission and being here today. Just in regards to the Section 21, which is the race training zone, I've looked it up. It's readily available, so it's a quick read. The reference to that, our knowledge on that, was there anything particularly that you wanted to highlight in that section for us, rather than just our awareness of it?
Yeah. Well, I'll start and Neil can finish.
Mindful of a minute too, that's what they'll wrap you up on.
It's draconian. It's been there for a long time, And it basically restricts all of the residents down there that they can't subdivide, they can't technically farm, they can do something with racehorses or something racehorse related and absolutely nothing else. And the big problem with that is, as the Plan Change C document stated, really not a lot of that happens down there now. So these people are left in limbo with absolutely no opportunity to do anything. And hence the reason why I think during that plan change process, the commissioners sort of thought that really that the other side of the road should be considered as well, and that there should be no, absolutely no race training zone at all unless it's inside the racecourse, and that those residents need to be included in Plan Change C. That was the outcome, but it never actually resolved, and that's why we ended up in mediation where council also made a commitment to those residents, which hasn't been followed through with.
The race training zone was established in the first place by the Manawatu Racing Club wanting to protect that land and make it safe for horses and people and have a community within that community. The Westside residents, all at that stage, were actually involved in racing, and a number of them still live there. And now that 2/3 of the race training zone has been taken away, we're left, as Grant says, with this piece of land that has no use whatsoever, and yet by putting services through there for both Kiki Whenua and ourselves, Part A and Part B, what you will achieve there is the services will be on their way towards the rest of Kangatangata. And this Section 21, you can't do anything. Please, I implore you to all read it and consider. This is so unique. I think if you Google race training zone, this is the only one in the country. I could be wrong, but I think that's how it is.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's all we have time for this morning. Thank you for coming in and voicing your submission. We're having deliberations on the 29th and 30th of May, and your views will be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, next, councillors, we will move to submission number 1122, and I'd like to call forward Ruth Jackson, please. Good morning, Ruth. You have 10 minutes to speak, and by all means, leave some time for some questions. Microphone's live, away you go.
Thanks for having me today. I'm an immediate neighbour of the proposed Awapuni Library, and I would mainly like to speak in support of that. I think it would be a wonderful initiative for the community. Talking to neighbours, there are some concerns about traffic management with that development, so I think it would be really good to work with especially Punakō Place residents about a really robust traffic management system, because there's a lot of children that live on that street. It would get very busy, I think, with the way the car park is placed. So I'm keen for more engagement with the community about that, but otherwise I think it's a wonderful initiative. And in general, I'd like to speak in support of the facilities proposed in the annual plan, in the long-term plan, specifically the library, the Pacifica Community Centre, and the Multicultural Centre as well. I think investing in our community in this way is really valuable. I think there may be some pushback given the costs and the cost of living crisis and the financial constraints of the council, but I believe investing in those community facilities now will have payback in the long term and result in connected communities who look after each other and look after our city. And so I believe those benefits far outweigh the cost. Open to any questions.
Thank you, Ruth. And first up, we have some questions, and Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Ruth. Just in your written submission, in terms of the proposed rates, you've made a comment that you're in a position to afford the rates increase, but you acknowledge those on limited income who might find that a bit more difficult. And you've suggested that you'd like to see some leniency and support for those people. I'm just interested to understand in what form that, what that would look like. What sort of support are you suggesting?
I understand there's already a rates rebate for those who are struggling with their rates. I guess I would like to see that continued, and for the cost of living to be mindful of that. If that needs to be broader or more investment in that for people who really can't afford their rates, then I would like to see that. Also, things like social housing for people who can't afford housing, and support for people in social housing is really important as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ruth. Just around the Awapuni hub, we've had a range of submissions on it, range of views. One of the views that's come through is kind of generally supporting it going ahead, but concerned around the cost, and a view that maybe that cost would be less than what's proposed.
Right.
If we were to go down that track, and we had the choice between compromising between the size of the facility or kind of how flash it was.
Yeah.
Do you have kind of a view around which of those two would be a better compromise to make?
Yeah, I would say the size is more important than how flash it is. Like, I think things like what's proposed at the moment is kind of a commercial kitchen and a meeting space, and I think that would be hugely valuable. I know that the current library, they have real trouble having groups in there because there's other people who want quiet space or workspace, and then there's a group like family groups and different community activities. So I think having that space with the community meeting space and a kitchen, as well as having the library itself, is really important.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth. My question is also about Awapuni Hub, and we have heard from others who also have traffic management concerns, and there's been some suggestion that the vehicle access should be to and from from College Street rather than Panako Place. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's already quite a busy street with the Girl Guides now. We probably, especially on a Wednesday when the Girl Guides used to meet, we'd have like 10 vehicles parked on what's quite a small street. I guess if the car park is big enough, then that might actually alleviate some of that pressure that we've got at the moment in Panako Place. In terms of putting the entry on College Street, it's a really busy intersection, like where Pitama is. I often won't even cross the road on College Street. I'll walk to the crossing because it doesn't feel safe, especially with children and a dog and stuff like that, getting across College Street. So I think in some ways Panako Place is a better option because people can turn off and it's a bit quieter. But just it would be good to work with the community about the best solution for that.
Brilliant. Thank you. I might just sneak one more in there, which is you had some comments about for growth in housing, building in a resilient way, and I wondered what does that look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I was thinking about expansion out rather than up. I would prefer that we did more expansion up than out. Yeah, I think having a more vibrant city centre with more apartment living available would be really beneficial.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to the Awapuni Library, you said a bigger library, and you'll be familiar with the size of the library now.
Yeah.
Are you aware that the current proposal's 15 times bigger than what we've got currently?
I hadn't done the sums, but I did look at the plans. Yeah, I think that community is growing. I mean, there's so many more houses that are coming in between Awapuni and Longburn. And I know there's a lot of schools that use the library. That space is under pressure. And the closest community centre in the Awapuni Park, like where the tennis club is under a lot of pressure as well. So I think there is a real need for a community space. And I see lots of options looking at community resilience and food security and stuff like that If you have a kitchen there with a meeting space, you can have all kinds of community events that involve food, and I think it's a really good option for that community.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ruth, how long have you lived where you live?
12 years.
12 years, okay. Oh, it's certainly great to hear the views of a neighbour. Thank you for coming in today and speaking to your submission, and deliberations on the 29th, 30th of May and be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Right, next councillors, we have submission number 1120, and would Bowles, Palmerston North and John Dunlop come forward, please? I believe you have a PowerPoint, so we'll get that one going. Now, if you just press the right-hand button on your console to light your console red, two of them already are. Lovely. Right, you have 10 minutes, and make sure leave some time for questions if you like.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in support of our proposal for a covered green at the Bowles Palmerston North site in Linton Street. With me today is Gary Fryer, President of the club, and Mike Simon, the Vice President. We'd like to acknowledge we've had a lot of support to get to where we are at the moment, and we have that support from Third Bearing originally, who put a proposal for the council, Sport Manawatu, who have been with us all the way along, Bowles New Zealand, Bowles Manawatu, and especially Aaron Phillips from your council. There's a number of factors obviously involved in why we want to put this sort of facility at our club. The nearest indoor facility from us is 131 k's away. The facilities are Hamilton to the north, New Plymouth west, Hastings to the east, and Nainai in the Wellington area. Obviously the advantage of this is the weather. Unfortunately, the weather gods have sprung us a really nice day, but it's not always like this in Palmy. So we can get play bowls, no cancellations, 100% of the time. So this obviously is immeasurable well-being benefits to the club and to the community. The construction costs, we're looking around the $2 million mark. Obviously, we'd like the council to help us out and also to support us, which is a major thing when we go forward to national funders, etc. We have employed a professional in this area to help us get these national funders, so it's not something we're just doing by ourselves, which is hugely important because obviously it's a very precise sort of market to be in. The facilities we're looking at are design and build. They all have 25 years or plus warranty on them. They are also of national event capabilities, which means that Bowles New Zealand have already given us an undertaking they will bring a televised event to the Manawatu if we get this facility in place. Some people may ask, how many people watch Bowles, etc. Bowles New Zealand do a spectacular effort in filming, producing and commentating sport. They put it on YouTube, but also give it free of charge to Sky TV. While we can't really get the numbers of Sky TV, the number of viewers, the viewers on YouTube last year was 1.2 million. So it's not an insurmountable number. Obviously, we can look at the success of covered facilities at the likes of the arena. I'm privileged enough to work in the middle of town, and I can see the basketball players, the volleyball players, etc., walking around the streets of Palmerston North, particularly school-age children and secondary school. So, and this is part of the area that we are looking to expand. We are currently in the process of getting a coach up to speed with teaching younger children. We want to bring in children of a younger age, school kids, etc. And the demographics of Bowles obviously is a elderly type activity, but in saying that, it's hugely supported by a younger age. The latest New Zealand team to go away went to Guernsey to play in an indoor arena bowls world championship. New Zealand were represented by Taylor Bruce, aged 29, and Shannon McElroy, who was aged 37. So as you can see, the age demographic is not necessarily the older, but is a full range. We've currently got a New Zealand representative at our club in Olivia Manson, who is 19 years old. While it's important with the youth to get them involved, it's also important that we keep the elderly of us still active and fit, and I guess with other people, socialising, etc., etc. And the advantages of having a covered green is that they can play anytime, no cancellations, and just come along. Playing membership numbers, while all sports are obviously struggle with numbers, playing membership for over New Zealand is up 3.6%. First year bowlers, it's up 21.35%. Casual participation is up 18.5%. And twilight bowling, which our club is hugely invested in, their participation numbers are up 31%. So as you can see, there is a scope for it. There is an opportunity to grow it further, but we need to be able to play all year round. So, any questions?
I think we've got something to play, do we? Oh, or we can share it later.
Okay.
Did you have a video, did you?
No, I've left it here with your people.
Right, okay, okay. Any questions, councillors? There is no question, so thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us, gentlemen. And submission deliberations will be 29th, 30th of May, and your views will be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Very much. Cheers.
Good. Right, councillors, next we have submission number 950, and I invite Les Fugel to step forward, please. Good morning, Les.
Good
Your
morning.
microphone is live. You all go. You've got 10 minutes to speak. Away you go.
Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Les Fugel. I'm a local land developer and a city ratepayer. I've made a written submission which questions whether council is correctly and fairly charging development contributions, given the narrow scope within the ability to charge. Unfortunately, council is yet to provide sufficient information for me to analyse whether those charges collected are in turn being directed solely for the use that governed by Part 5 of the Act, hence unable to pursue this point further. However, I shall revisit this concern once become aware of council's projects that are drawing down on development contributions. From the information gathered, council appears at times to be meeting project costs entirely from development contribution funds. That said, I put it to council, development contributions acts as a barrier to development. To the extent I'm aware of projects have and are being shelved due to the high and arguably unjustifiable levy charges. While council's development contribution revenues arrives from a range of activities, a large proportion comes off the back of greenfield developments. That is, the full cost of road build together with installing all services, which I add need to be sized for future growth. The services are also required to have a minimum usable life of no less than 50 years, which in turn raises the question to what extent are new, additional or increased capacity services are actually required throughout the city that the developer is not meeting. Further, council requires payments of development contribution charge prior to the issue of the 223/224 certificate that enables the uplift of new titles. This upfront charge, perceived by developers as unfair, as in the large majority of cases, it is months, if not years, before a newly created section is built upon, which is when the section uses council services. Why I do not support development contributions full stop and consider council as disproportionately charging, council could have effectively generated similar income revenue if we were to assist development occurring quicker. Using the Country as an example, development contributions sit around about 10,000 per new lot, with rates around about 3K. If development contributions were not charged, council would put themselves in the same financial position via rate charge in a little over 3 years, while at the same time creating an incentive for developers to bring on multi-lot developments. Developers in the large are no longer building multi-lot developments, as are required to pay rates on each lot, notwithstanding be years before the allotments are sold and built upon. The current development contribution charges, coupled with other regulatory requirements, have effectively created a monopoly, whereby now it is too expensive and regulated for new players to enter the market. If council wants to see cheaper land costs and the associated jobs that arise from it, from development, they must work with developers, not against. Just before I invite any questions, I point out rate increases arrive from all but council expenditure. The community are far too aware of unnecessary and overspending council has committed to. I will not go into examples as there is insufficient time here today, but note council has over 150 staff on salary of more than $100,000 and is expending millions of dollars annually on consultants, notwithstanding having a staff number exceeding 650. A prudent manager of debt, brackets, council's interest bill alone now above 10 million and forecast to rapidly increase for interest alone, ceases all but crucial spending. That appears not to be the situation with this council. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions either now or later that members may have.
Thank you, Les. And Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Les. I'm just interested to understand, if you don't support DCs, who you think should be paying for the cost of growth.
Sorry, what was that?
You said in your submission that you don't support development contributions. I'm just wondering who you think should be funding the cost of growth.
Well, that's a two-part answer. The first thing, most downward infrastructure is already met by developers. So while we might be developing a particular stage at this given time, we've already created the previous stages. So the developer has met those costs. The second aspect of that is when you do development, as I pointed out, you need to put services in that not only accommodate increased capacity further down the track, but also using material that has a shelf life, they call it, of no less than 50 years. So that does sort of beckon the question, really, what downstream work is required. Now, admittedly, it's not a blanket answer. There are some areas, and we'll use Ashurst as an example, where council has to extend some of the services out there. But there seems to be a lot of infrastructure going on at the moment that is not purely as a requirement of development.
So my question is, who should pay for the cost of that growth, of that infrastructure?
Well, the developer is already paying, number one. Secondly, there's a proportional basis goes on where the development levies, and I don't know what the figure is, but it used to be council seeks to recover about 80% of the infrastructure costs from development levies. So therefore the developer is paying that money.
Les, have you had a chance to review the new proposed development contributions policy?
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Les. I had a couple of questions. You mentioned charging from when a development connects to services is more appropriate than not when the enabling works are installed. Could you elaborate on that? Are you thinking DCs are more of a connection for service fee?
So the current system or process is that when the developer applies for the completion certificate, they pay the development levies at that point. Now, it varies obviously, but often sections are not built on for a long time, and sometimes years, particularly in today's sort of economical market there. So that developer is carrying all those costs on the way through. However, is not using those services, which in the majority of cases the developer is already paid for downstream, is not using those services until the house is actually built on that section. Now, some councils have a different way of looking at this. For instance, to help developers, and I'll use Manawatu District Council as an example, they are open to look at a system where the charges are not paid for until they start to use those services. And to protect council in those situations, they may take out some sort of caveat or lien or whatever over the land title. So they're ensured they do get paid eventually.
Right, thank you. And I just had one other, which was about our proposal to recover the interest portion of the cost of into DCs. And I'm interested in your view with a developer hat on and then a ratepayer hat on, whether you think that interest portion should be falling to you to subsidise through rates or fall wholly within the developer undertaking that work.
Well, what I'm effectively saying there is that at the moment the system is a disadvantage to bring on multi-lot subdivisions. Now, council could achieve the same end goal by if developers bring on sections a lot quicker and obviously sold and developed there, etc. And if you sort of crunch the numbers, you could be in the same position over a period of about 3 years. So sure, council wouldn't get that money immediately up front, but they recover it by rates by earlier development.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all we have time for this morning. Thank you, Les, for coming in. Always interesting hearing your views and those views of a large-scale developer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, councillors, we have submission number 116. I'd like to invite Helen King forward, please. Okay, Helen is not here yet, so we will move on, to 1164, the Manawatu Regional Volleyball Association Incorporated, and welcome Kelsey Higgins forward, please. Welcome, Kelsey. You have 10 minutes to speak, and feel free to leave some time for questions. Thank you.
Great. First, I want to say thank you to Council for giving us this opportunity to come speak on either on behalf of our personal beliefs around the long-term plan. I'm here today representing our volleyball association. I'm the general manager, and I apologize up front for my voice. I'm often either in here sick or after long tournaments, so that's just kind of what I sound like. Our submission was primarily around the master plan for Central Energy Trust Arena. It's our primary community sport hub, and the investment in that is just, it's an irreplaceable asset, not just to volleyball, but to the rest of our sporting codes within the region. For volleyball, it's an asset of 19 courts. That space is just not replaceable, even combined from all the gym spaces that we do have within the region. For our code, it hosts over 5,000 participants a year, and it's been the long-standing host of New Zealand secondary school volleyball champs. The venue was able to support a 20% increase to that event this year, meaning we had over 198 high school teams here in Palmerston North, and that's over 2,500 participants and upward of 3,000, including spectators and parents, coaches that would have joined them for the week. We know that sport has a positive impact on our community, not just on mental and physical health, but it also creates a sense of belonging, somewhere for people to go and join a new group of faces outside their families or work environments. With that, the arena has stated that there's over 3,000 bookings annually. And if we consider one of our volleyball bookings would easily be over 300 participants per night. It's just such a large aspect of our community that is involved in events at the facility. And we need to be able to plan for long-term growth of the city and around its use. Right now, as community sporting codes, we've already outgrown the space. Between volleyball, basketball, and netball, we use the same main area of Arena 2, 3, and 4 for all of our events. The size of our sporting codes right now, basketball in the youth space would be number 2 in the country, and volleyball would be number 3 for participants. Volleyball has also had an 11% increase, which would be the fastest growth rate. So with the proposed growth of our sports, as well as growth within our city, the infrastructure at Arena just isn't sustainable to be able to provide the community aspects of which are often the first that get kind of knocked off when we're planning sporting events. We know that the large commercial events often take priority because of the financial aspects. We want to make sure that long-term we're able to provide those same resources to our social competitors as well. Obviously, throughout the long-term plan, it's always down to options around where money gets invested. I just always want to make sure that we advocate for the arena because of its commercial viability. So not just through larger commercial events, but that our community groups are also pay-to-use contracts within the space. We know within those events, there's over $4 million of economic impact brought into the city. Our national tournament last year would have been $4 million of that. And so the growth to be able to continue to use that space and investment in that space is just something that I wanted to be here to advocate for today. Ultimately, we're in support of option 1 for the arena master plan. And we just propose that the sporting codes are worked with more closely around that plan, moving from its current concept, so that just the use of us needing more courts or more space isn't heard, but actual functionality for the events that we host is really taken into consideration before any of those plans move further forward. And then lastly, I would just ask that, I guess, moving forward, when council does propose these long-term plans, that there's a bit more cost breakdown. Even someone that was spent quite a bit of time to try and understand how our parks budget was such a large portion of the spend, to recognize that a large portion of that is not going into sports or active rec or play spaces, and whether that means that some of our spaces need to be separated out from just being designated a park space, that budget has a way to accurately reflect what is going into sport, rec, and play versus just open other community spaces that happen to fall into park facilities. That's it.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission. I just want to be clear, are you supporting what is proposed in the long-term plan for Arena as is, or are you advocating for some kind of change?
The Arena's master plan right now, we have been consistently told, is only conceptual, and so even within option 1, that what is within that draft is not actually the construction that will happen, but the proposal of what options within the development will happen. So we are in support of those options, but the draft and concept of it overall needs to be revised to meet our sporting codes needs in the facility.
And so can you be precise about what your sporting codes needs are? Is it more space?
No, so one instance would be that the new Arena 5 is not connected to Arena 2, 3, and 4. It is going to be community court space in that proposal, but it's not connected to our current space. And so for us, that's not functional. It doesn't actually add more value or benefit when we're running an event, because to be able to deliver it on the other end of the complex, we just can't do when we're talking youth sport. We need to be able to have a centralized space. That proposal also has a concept within it that removes some of the court space that is currently available within Arena 3 and Arena 4. So in the case of volleyball, adding 4 more volleyball courts at another end of the overall arena complex, while taking 2 away in our current space. It's not functionally really giving us more benefit.
Okay, so what are you asking us to do?
We're just asking that the community sports in Sport Motto 2 have a larger voice within that plan, going from its conceptual state as it is right now to the next phase of the draft plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. That did actually touch on my question. So I wanted to ask you, if you were spending $36 million on the arena, what, if you were ranking top 3 projects, what would you want to see prioritised?
On behalf of volleyball, we definitely are in need of more court space. While the arena does provide 19 courts, 4 of those courts are in Arena 2, which are only used for school nationals. It's not a venue that we're able to use on a weekly basis for community events. A lot of that comes down to cost, and then as well as our larger events take longer time to be able to set up, so Arena just can't have us in there on a day-to-day basis. I would go from there to say that the concepts around keeping the space that we currently have needs to be a priority within that, and some of the plans, I guess, around aesthetic designs maybe need to take less of a priority.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Just you talked a little bit about commercial viability, and in your written submission you've talked about, with the increase in rates, that you strongly support prioritisation of projects that can provide means of direct revenue, and so that there's more financial sustainability to support other projects within the 10-year plan. Currently, the revenue that the arena brings in covers 25% of the cost of the arena, and the other 75% comes from ratepayers. Do you think that's about where it should be? Does that sit right with you, or do you think that more of the fees and charges should pay more of those costs?
I do think that there's some work to be done between our local community sports and the arena to better prioritize bookings so that we can get maximal use out of our contribution into that cost. I would also say that I've yet to find a good way to determine how much of the economic impact that those events bring in, while they don't particularly drive money directly back to the facility itself, it is driving money into our local economy. And so how that plays into the portion that arena has to cover in those costs, I think is something that needs to be considered versus a direct pay portion of the venue overall costs.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming in, Kelsey. Great to hear from you today, and we wish you all the best. Right, next, councillors, we have submission number 1116, and invite Helen King forward, please.
Okay, it looks like my microphone's on already, which is always a hurdle to cross. Kia ora, everybody. My name is Helen King. I'm here for this submission in a personal capacity, and I'll be submitting on behalf of Environment Network Manawa 2 with my colleague Mads, I believe at 12:20 when she comes out of a meeting. This is actually the first time I've submitted to a long-term plan. I submit to them a lot in my work. But there were a couple of things that came up here that I felt like I really wanted to talk to council about and raise from a personal perspective. One of them is natural burials. Now, I do lots of interesting things with my job, and recently, through my E&M work, helping to bring together people who are interested in natural burials and pushing forward with this as a city to have a natural burial site was something that we did. But this one really got me, actually. It's in my will, and I wrote my will 5 years ago. And I just remember thinking, gosh, my kids are going to love me if I die young or if this doesn't come into fruition. Not considering the fact clearly that we didn't have that facility here. Having those people in a room who were really, really passionate about that, and also learning that this has been a 25-year conversation now, made me go, gosh, Palmy, we really need to act on this now. This is the wishes of a lot of people, and again, slight E&M perspective, but we have people every day emailing us saying they want to be part of this group of people who is informed about what goes on here and how we progress. So I'd really like to see the progression of this, the swifter progression of a natural burial site in the city. Now, I understand a little bit about this long-term conversation. I understand part of the problem is around finding somewhere to do it. I wonder if the Kelvin Grove Cemetery can be reassessed. I understood that the soil there isn't perfect, but I think you might have to build the perfect soil a little bit to make that happen, as well as allowing people to have their final wishes carried out. This is also a lovely little reforestation programme as well. The pictures I've seen of natural burial sites throughout the country is that they are beautiful, and people can go there and remember and mourn their loved ones in a truly natural and gorgeous way. The other thing I wanted to talk to was Featherstone Street, and I'm sure that you've had many, many people come and talk about this. I've been reading all the stuff on the news. I've been privy to some of the conversations and seeing what was going on there. But I actually went and took a walk and drive down Featherstone Street the other day, and I just actually thought it was incredibly clever. I loved how cyclists were isolated from the traffic and how people could walk. It felt incredibly safe to me, and I honestly just thought to myself, that's absolutely brilliant. I understand that there are a lot of people struggling with this change, but in my submission, I think I've just said, carry on being brave. I think change doesn't happen overnight, and I think some people have kind of missed the point. This seems to me a little bit around, de-incentivizing traffic in this area, which is very heavy with pedestrians, and some of our most precious pedestrians, some of our very, very young people on those school areas. And to carry on with that, change does take time. But, there are all kinds of benefits to prioritising walkers and cyclists there, not only the safety, what it can potentially do for business, and I know some businesses are struggling with that now and coming to terms with that, but there are other business opportunities around that and around the fact that people who walk and cycle do linger that little bit more and can be attracted into spaces. And I think good work has started, and I hope it continues. It's a big deal, and lots of people have a lot to say about it, but my take on it is brilliant. Keep going. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions, councillors? No. Right, that's all then. Thank you very much. But you may as well stay in the hot seat, because I believe... Oh, right, okay. No.
I'm out the hot seat.
Yep, thank you, thank you. Okay, councillors, next we move to submission number 1176 in Ian Staples. Welcome, Ian. Your microphone's live. You've got 10 minutes to speak. Away you go.
Yeah, well, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. And I've got to say to you that getting this document was like pulling teeth out of the council. I went to the office downstairs to get one. Oh, we've got them. I don't know where they are. And they said they'll mail me one. I'm still waiting. And I got this one by a little bit of subterfuge. I went to the meeting in the conference centre and they got me one there. And it took me 4 days to read it. And I had to read it so I know what I was talking about. Now, I'm rather interested in the finances of the council because I do not want to see it go down the Swanee like Detroit, Chicago, New York, and other places right around the planet, just because one morning they wake up and the bank balance says $1 short. $1 short is bankruptcy. So I've got a little bit of a story on that. I go back a long way. Back in the day, there used to be some finance companies about. One was named Cornish. One Monday morning, they were $1 short, gone. Jeff's Brothers, ditto. And there's been several others, and probably some of you know about those. So Simeon Brown put out a little bit of paper, says, Minister tells council to prioritise must-haves over nice-to-haves. So that's one of my messages for you. I'm not going to talk much about my submission. You've read it, I hope. And I sort of agree with what I wrote, most of that. But I have had a bit more time now to think about a few things. And an example I had when I was back in the day when I was in the power boards as an engineer, I went to a meeting and the Manawatu Power Board, and they had the CEO from Wairarapa Power Board there, and he was waxing lyrical about borrowing money to spend on their capital expenses. And that's all very well, but the question I asked him at the end of the meeting was, what happens when the interest you pay brings your expenses above income? Oh, it'll never happen, was the stern reply. Well, within 2 years, they had to come crawling to what was then Powerco to get over their bankruptcy. So I guess you guys need to be rather careful on what you spend, because that's where we're heading for, that sort of thing with the debt you're looking at and those sorts of things. So I've got to make sure that you really do essentials, you know, true core business. There's a few things that I don't want to be about. The Te Motu o Patea, that's Anzac Park, I haven't practiced that other words properly. That's an absolute no-no. If the people that want that can't stump up with sufficient money to make it look as though they want it, then why would we as ratepayers have to pay for that? It's a nonsense. Now, the other thing I've come up with is I've given you a 3B rating, which stands for bumps, bikes and buses. But I've discovered another one. Another B for bollards. Whoopie-doo. Right, okay, so that whole business, I've just got to emphasise that whole business in Featherston Street, Rangatiki Street, that was started after Simeon Brown mentioned that you should not do any more of that. And I'm just really curious to know why you went on with it and made such an absolute mess of the whole thing. I've just got to ask this question of you. How is it that intelligent people can make such blunders? I'll be kind with the words I use. It's an absolute travesty, that lot. Good grief. And worse than that, when you finally get the message, you're going to have to remove it at a great more expense. And that's a double whammy for nothing. I'm really impressed about that. Okay. What else have I got? Seismic upgrades. Well, you are aware that the government have given you an extra 4 years, and that should give your planning on those a bit of a relief. And I'm rather interested that the museum, instead of wasting money on strengthening those buildings, I'm a bit rather for the rebuild on that one. It's a hell of an expensive, but and it's a nice to have instead of a must have. So, but I like the idea of that. Development contributions, yeah, I've got a comment in my thing on that. Transport, yeah, BBB. Nature calls. What is the matter with people? Nature calls. NASA put people in a space station. They don't take water up. They've got enough water there, and they recycle and reuse and reuse and reuse. Israel do the same. Reuse, 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 because they don't have water. And here we are spending money on upgrade of a plant. Yes, you've got to do that, but why not upgrade the plant properly and put the water in the river and somehow educate those people who don't want the water in the river that this is just as good as water that you drink. And it would save a hell of a lot of money on that land nonsense that you're playing with. I just don't understand how you can come up with stuff like that. Yeah. Well, really, that's it from me today. I'm being rather short, so I wonder if you've got any questions.
Short, sweet, to the point. Thank you for that. First up, we have Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ian. Do have a couple of questions. Oh, sorry. Oh, I've given you a promotion. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Arnott. Thank you, Ian, for your submission. You've put a couple of comments in your written submission that I wanted to ask you about. One was about where you said the so-called carbon crisis, there is no proof, is a nonsense and is causing so much of the stuff in the LTP. Do you want to talk to us a bit more about that? Do you not believe in climate change?
Where does the heat come from?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer questions. I'm asking them.
Okay, well, the heat comes from the sun. Are you not aware that two things have happened? One is that the sun is at its hottest that it's been for a very, very long time, to wit, the number of mass coronal ejections that are coming off. It's just, it's throwing its fuel out into space at great, huge amounts. And that's the other thing. And the other thing is the Earth is the closest it gets to the sun as well. So we've got two things working against us at this very time. And the prediction I have is that by 2035, we'll be able to ice skate on the Manawatu River.
Sorry, is that the extent of your answer?
Well, that's what I understand from what my research has given me, is what's going to happen. Because the Earth, with all that energy that comes out of the sun, then that's its fuel. When you take a log out of your fire and put it outside and leave what's there, what happens to the fire? It goes out. Back in the 1600s, they had what they called the Maunder cooling, and that was when only two sunspots stopped, and Earth became so cold you could skate on the Thames, and thousands and thousands of people died because the coolness of the atmosphere was that they just could not grow the food to support them. So we're looking at that coming up in the 2030s. And if you're not aware of that, you've got to do some digging and find out.
Okay, let's move on to the second question then, which is your comments around fluoride. So you've said that fluoride is a toxin in the drinking water.
Yes, the science is quite proven. That's been a toxin. It comes out of the fertiliser works. Back in the day, stuff used to go up the stack and downwind, and every 3 or 4 years the fertiliser company had to go and replace all the windows of the downwind houses because that stuff ate the windows away. Now it's hydrofluorosilicic acid, and what happens to it? It goes into your stomach, and the first thing that happens when it gets there and reacts with your stomach acid is that the fluorine itself is released as fluorine. And it goes around and scavenges all the carbon it can find in your body, including your teeth and your bones, and causes bone damage. And the other part of it, it's been proven now that newborns that are on fluoridated water are up to or around about 5% lower in their IQs because of the brain damage that they get in utero. And further than that, continuing with that, that continues through the life of drinking fluoridated water. And it should be removed because it's a toxin, and I don't know what the money trail is, but I suspect there's a money trail here that the fertiliser works are paying someone to get rid of that stuff because they are not allowed to put it anywhere else except in our water, and that's a complete nonsense as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. I think
It
we'll
should
move
not
on.
be
Any
allowed.
other questions, Councillor?
No, I'll let someone else have a question.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ian. I just wanted to ask, because the comments you made in your verbal submission were different to what you wrote in your submission. So regarding seismic strengthening of buildings, you've selected option 2, only do the required seismic upgrades of these facilities in their current locations, but you said in your verbal submission you'd like to see the buildings rebuilt rather than just upgraded.
Yeah,
So I
can
just
you
want
say
some
that again?
clarity.
I didn't quite get it.
I just want some clarity on whether or not you believe with Te Manawa and the library we should just strengthen the existing buildings, or if you would prefer we rebuilt a new building.
Well, I shouldn't do that, but well, we've got to consider whether that's a nice to have or a must have. I think the Awapuni one, the building you've got there is buggered, so I think it's time you've got to do something with that. But the library at Monrad Park, well, it's a little wee thing, yes, but what's wrong with that now because it's working as far as I know. And it's becoming a nice to have, not a must have. And you guys are not in the place to muck around with nice to haves.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian, for coming and sharing your views this morning, and very good. All the best.
Cool, thank you.
29th to 30th of May, submissions will be heard, okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
In 3 years' time, I'll be better at it.
Next, councillors, we move on to 1179, Creative Sounds Society Incorporated, The Stomach, and welcome Abby, the manager, forward, please. Good morning.
Morning, kia ora, thanks for having us. Kia ora, thank you all so much for having us back to discuss our requests for the funding increase. I'm Abby Symes, the kai whakahaere of The Stomach, and this is Amelia Shadbolt, a member of the Creative Sounds Management Committee. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the wonderful position The Stomach is already in. We're so proud to be a sector lead, and we couldn't be more grateful for the existing funding agreement we've got with PNCC. We couldn't do it without you, and we're stoked to serve the amazing people of Te Papaioia with your support and encouragement. I trust you all know the background of why we're here and what we're asking for, but in brief, Creative Sounds The Stomach are asking for an additional $68,000 per annum in addition to our sector lead funding agreement. We initially presented this request with our annual report to the Arts and Culture Committee, and our submission hopefully answered some of the questions we received at the time. Here's a quick summary. Why are we asking for more money? We're seeking this extra funding to support an outreach role. The funding for our current community outreach coordinator finishes at the end of June and can't be renewed. The amount we're seeking covers the coordinator's full-time salary and operational expenses related to the role. We're really eager to establish it as a full-time role again, but we're also prepared to shape a same but different role with council. For example, a part-time role focused on outreach and administrative support would go a long way towards maintaining the cracking pace we've set over the past 3 years. We'll welcome any questions on that shortly. What have been the benefits of this role? In short, we've done more stuff for more people. If you refer to the brief stats on page 10 and 11, you'll see we've increased services across the board and our core functions, recording, rehearsal, gigs and education. These increases are directly tied to the outreach role. Without the extra full-time role, we expect a drop in service across these metrics. But don't worry, we'll still be meeting our sector lead obligations and then some. We just want to explain what will drop off. So gigs will be cut back to a maximum of 24 a year. Because we've reduced staffing, there'll be also a higher reliance on volunteer help. We expect a significant drop in attendance once our social media is less active and we can't put on as many youth-facing events. Young people are real good at bringing their whole whānau and friends to shows. Workshops and other events will be reduced because of reduced staffing. Available studio time will have to decrease because our engineer Nigel won't be able to work uninterrupted as often. We also anticipate a drop in rehearsal hours as less office coverage means less bookings and fewer staff means we'll have to reduce hours in some way. Our submission has a lot of qualitative info and we really urge you to take that into consideration. We believe this role supports our agreed activities and outcomes in a tremendously valuable way. Please see the table under benefit number 3 of page 8 on our submission for how we tie the outreach role directly to the PNCC strategic goals. While statistics and measurables go a long way to explaining the value of this role, and we've been stoked to be able to do heaps of extra stuff, we can also appreciate that it's been incredible to have an extra pair of hands at the stomach to allow us all to work better. This is outlined in secondary benefits on page 10 of our submission. We also understand and saw one of our awesome users present last night about his experience as a user and a volunteer at the stomach. These kinds of relationships are the exact thing an outreach role gives us the capacity to foster, maintaining and supporting users like Denial. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to submit. We're so appreciative of the position and we're grateful for everything you do for us. PNCC in the tummy, truly a match made in heaven, also made in 1988. We're open to any questions. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us again. Sure. I just want to ask, it would be great if we can give you the full 68. If we weren't able to, and we were able to give you perhaps $35,000, I recall you made around a $33,000 surplus last year. Would that enable you to continue to keep the position?
So to speak to the surplus, I think that was funding carryover from the funding for this role.
Okay.
So it was a little tricky. When we were given the funding, it was for 3 years, but it took us a while to recruit into the role, and we recruited Abby actually. And then when Abby became the manager, there was a little bit extra. So basically the period of the funding. So we've carried it over, and that underspend MCH, the Ministry for Culture and Heritage, allowed us to use that on capital investments, but they wouldn't allow us to use it on wages to continue this role.
That's really useful to know. And
Yeah.
so just for our understanding to inform our deliberations,
Yeah.
is it a situation where it's either $68,000 or nothing?
Oh,
Or is there
absolutely
any
not. Sorry. So the
compromise?
second part of that, we are absolutely willing to look at a part-time role. We think we could still deliver, perhaps not exactly the numbers we've been meeting. There would still be some reduction in service, but we do think we could still absolutely maintain some of the benefits we've found of having this role as a full-time role.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koroa. Just from what we've heard about the impact of the Community Outreach Coordinator, is that the key enabler for you to achieve the strategic, the sector-led deliverables that we've set for you?
I wouldn't say key. We'll absolutely still deliver those. What we've found, though, is that in addition to just putting on, for example, extra specific gigs that the outreach role creates and runs, the extra capacity has been really transformative for us because it allows Abby and the other staff to focus more on their roles. So, I suppose a simple example of that is we would be putting on gigs regardless, but the outreach role being so active with social media and bringing new people to us means that we get more people at those gigs. Would you
And
say
I think,
that's
like,
fair?
in addition, we became a sector lead before the community outreach role, so, like, we can continue to deliver that. But just, yeah, what we've been able to deliver in the past 3 years has been, like, massive.
Right, thanks. So I'm thinking of, one of the deliverables is creative and exciting events, and another is that capacity and connection. So feeling like there might be reduced capacity across the board, or do you think you might be putting your resources into one rather than the other?
Yeah,
if you
it would
lose this role?
probably be, like, yeah, so two gigs a month would be, like, our max is what we can achieve. That was what we've done in the past and what we can do, but, so yeah, like, the focus would need to then be moved to more community engagement and things.
Yeah, and it means like something that will definitely reduce would be workshops. We wouldn't be able to, and in fact, all of the stats, we would expect a reduction in to some degree, just because of the reduced staffing essentially. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
very
you.
much.
Councillor Finlay.
If the council decided that we could give you some money towards his salary, whatever it is, have you identified any other funders you could apply to?
Yes, absolutely. So one of them that we've identified is Creative New Zealand have new funding available. So we'll certainly be seeking funding from them regardless, but this would be the type of thing we would totally be interested in co-funding. There are also some other funders like Eastern and Central Trust. That we've
I think
been
the only like hesitation or like gutted thing about it is that like both Creative New Zealand and Eastern and Central Trust have just changed their funding, the way they do it, their structure and things. So I think it's going to be like more competitive pools. So that's the only kind of
we're aware that often salaries or wages is not an attractive thing for funders. They much prefer a tight little tidy project.
What about lotteries, COGS, pub charities?
Yeah, we do
receive
all them.
Yeah, we receive lotteries funding, which contributes
do?
to our operational costs. Yeah.
Right. So just throwing it out there, what would be your bottom line that you would need from council?
Great question.
Deliberate.
Look, the 30 grand number that was mentioned would absolutely, we could still do a lot with that.
Right, was that?
We could still do a lot with that money. We could still establish a part-time role. And like I say, if we were able to successfully get funding from others, then
You grow it.
potentially the full-time, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Time for another quick one. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Just wanted to ask about another aspect of your excellent submission, and that was around regulatory protection for music venues in the city centre.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So our previous manager, Harry Lilly, spoke really eloquently about this last year and has written a wonderful summary. So I'm happy to share that with you as well. But it's basically like, it refers to CPI adjustment, funding the maintenance of venues and learning from the agent of change principle that cities like Melbourne have adopted to prevent development negatively impacting on city nightlife. The Save Our Venues organisation has also made an awesome submission to the Wellington district plan, and we can share that with you as well about like safeguarding our venues.
Cool. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you for coming in and submitting. I always thought the stomach's a great asset for the Sydney. Always been disappointed that I'm tone deaf. Thank you
You
very
are
much.
still welcome.
Yeah, everyone is welcome. Come and consume.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have number 1185 councillors, and I'd like to welcome Chief Executive Kelly Shanks from Sport Manawatu forward, please. Welcome.
Kia ora. We would like to acknowledge and commend Palmerston North City Council for your open, transparent and inclusive approach to seeking feedback from the community. We would like to thank and commend you for all of your support and the value that you place on play, recreation and sport. Palmerston North has many recreation and sporting achievements to be proud of. In these financially challenging times, we thank you for providing safe, interactive, beautiful, accessible and free spaces and places for the community to be active. You play a crucial role in the community's physical activity landscape, providing essential facilities, opportunities that empower local participation. As outlined in our submission, there is no denying the importance and impact of play, recreation and sport in supporting the 4 types of well-being that local government is expected to deliver on: social, economic, environmental and culture. As provided more extensively in our submission, the stats and evidence clearly demonstrate that play, recreation and sport keeps people physically and mentally well. Better quality of life, increased life expectancy, prevention of diseases, social connections, community cohesion. Engagement in play has shown to improve executive functioning, language, early math skills, physical development. The New Zealand Sport and Education Programme found that using sport as a context for learning and engagement in schools resulted in improved attendance rates, decreased behaviour incidents, higher retention rates, increased engagement levels and improved NCA results. So all in all, sport and recreation is pretty brilliant. It really contributes towards a healthy, well-connected and thriving community. So you asked us to tell us what you think about the goals. Our suggestion for goal 2, which is creating an exciting city, is to include the word sport, as it only refers to play and recreation, and it feels kind of like it's accidentally been missed off, hopefully not deliberately. We would also like to recommend the inclusion of the word sport in the draft recreation and play plan, which is fantastic, by the way. We appreciate and commend you for including the Regional Sport Facility Plan, He Raki-Tua, to guide decision-making in the draft recreation and play plan. In regards to play, we commend you for being a leading play advocate figure across the region with the play policy and the amazing mahi by your local play advisor. We strongly encourage you to continue the value and importance of play. In regards to housing, if building medium density housing, then we ask you to consider ways in which play and keeping people physically active could be integrated into the design. In regards to active transport, we commend you for the walkways and cycleways along the Awa and around the city. These shared, inclusive pathways are an asset to the city and consistently used by the community and visitors. We support the investment into improving infrastructure to support a connected, safe cycle network, as well as walkways which are inclusive, connected and accessible. We also advocate for the continuation of support to upskill tamariki, rangatahi and adults on cycle skills. In regards to Central Energy Trust, CET Arena, what a fantastic facility. It's hosting many local, regional and national sporting events and has developed a name for itself as a hub for national secondary school sports. The ability to attract these events to Arena should not be taken for granted, however. To remain competitive and to ensure the community can access these spaces, we must maintain and improve current facilities. We understand the current financial climate. However, as stated in your consultation document, although Council pays for the upfront cost, there is a fee for use, which, unlike other builds, there is a dollar return on investment in regards to Arena. We support the upgrades of CET Arena that are required to ensure fit-for-purpose and future-proof facility is available for local user groups and the wider region. Ensuring we are not reducing the number of courts available, allowing for our growing population and demand of indoor space has strongly been heard from our sporting community. Our sport partners clearly state that upgrading current facilities such as Arena 5 is imperative, and we strongly agree with this. To complement the current Arena Master Plan Steering Group, we would like to advocate for a recreation sporting community subgroup to ensure there is a strong community voice that connects in a more formal way as Arena moves from conceptual design into practical design. We can support in that space if deemed appropriate. We would like to advocate for the development of a regional events strategic advisory group to support the coordination of all events across the region, not just sporting events. This would ensure regional events are coordinated, as we want all visitors to have a great experience when they come here, so that they come back again. In regards to our outdoor sports, maintaining and improving playing fields and training fields is a priority for our sector. The needs assessment undertaken in 2020 clearly demonstrates a need for demand of at least one artificial turf. Artificial turf has been proven in other centres as is seen as an efficient way of increasing training capacity. Feedback from our sports sector on outdoor grounds and facilities states a shortage of grounds can be accessed and used when there are wet weather conditions or adverse weather events, which we all know is growing. The number of cancelled trainings and games is increasing for our outdoor sports. Having multi-use turf as well as lighting on current sports facilities will allow a range of codes to be able to access opportunities for playing and training. Outdoor sports are affected particularly during winter when they're not able to access the grounds beyond 5 o'clock due to a lack of lighting. This severely impinges on their ability to train, causes scheduling challenges and limits when games can be played. Where multiple codes use the same grounds, these factors are magnified. We would like to highlight the impact to sports on old and outdated changing rooms. We would like you to consider more emphasis being placed on making changing room facilities more multi-use, modern, accessible and non-gender specific to allow for greater utilisation and increased access to facilities. We support the recommendation of the Aquatic Facilities Needs Assessment, including the development of partnerships with schools, and support the feasibility study identified in the LTP. In regards to the Active Community Fund provided by Council, we want you to know that this has made a huge impact directly in reducing barriers for whānau to be active. Given the current climate and pressures that whānau and sport are under, and the sinking lid policy for gaming funding, codes are experiencing multiple pressures on their ability to keep sport affordable with reduced funding sources available. We strongly advocate for the continuation of the Active Communities Fund as it will be in more demand than ever. Nearly there. Additionally, the Sport Event Partnership Fund is creating substantial economic impact for our community as we are able to secure and host large national events. We do, however, need to highlight that with the cost of events significantly increasing, this will have an impact on our ability to support the same level of events going forward. We know the value that play, recreation, sport has in our community. We look forward to continuing our partnership with you and the community to increase accessibility so everyone can be active if they choose to. We would like to thank you, as well as the wonderful officers, for your continued support and partnership.
I'd like to call on Rachel Bowen online, please.
Kia ora, Kelly. See you. I hope you can see and hear me. A couple of questions. Just the request there about lighting for play space, sports spaces, play spaces. Did you have anywhere particular in mind? What would your priority be?
We've certainly heard strongly from the sporting community around Coronation Park.
Okay. Thanks for that. And then comments about Arena 5 particularly, and supporting the upgrade of that space. We heard yesterday from the skating community who were strongly of the view that that facility was fit for purpose for them. Do you have a comment on that?
I would say from a wider sector point of view, rather than an individual point of view, then it's not fit for purpose.
Can you say more about how that's impacting on different codes?
So the utilisation by other codes is very limited, and they have quite specifics around what they need in regards to the sports that they play. So it limits the usage of Arena around which arena they can have access to, if that makes sense. So then it's a reduced space for them at the moment, versus if they had the upgrade, then they have more space available.
That's great. I'm sure there are lots of other questions in the queue, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
There are lots of other questions, but we only have a minute to go. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission. Given Sport Manawatu has experience in fundraising and supporting sports organisations for capital upgrades of facilities, I wonder if you'd have a view on the proposed Arena 5, whether or not there's an opportunity for a community fundraising element rather than just funding.
That's a lot of fundraising. I think fundraising is very challenging, given that I guess across the sector, sports themselves, who are volunteers, actually don't get paid, already fundraise for their own sports, and that's how they survive. Also, there's other areas like athletes, and it's very broad. I think the community is quite tapped out in regards to fundraising. And asking them when you're already going to have a huge increase in rates, potentially, as well as the cost of living crisis. The money is then coming from the community again in another way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's all we have time for. Thank you for your submission, and we're making deliberations on the 29th and 30th of May, and your views will be considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call forward submission number 1227, the Kelvin Grove Community Association Incorporated. John Charlton, Treasurer. John, you have 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Live. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a presentation. I do have a PowerPoint presentation which has got a map on it which I would like to show you, if we can bring that up. Kelvin Grove Community Association, we run the Kelvin Grove Community Centre on behalf of the council. And that centre is actually right on the edge of Kelvin Grove, which nicely sums up the lack of long-term planning we feel has occurred for our suburb. Still haven't got the presentation. We are getting growth to the south, the west, the east and the north, either residential or industrial. And to our west, we're cut off from the rest of the city by the railway line, and the only ways in and out are Tremaine Avenue and Napier Road, and which would be fine if we had some community facilities in the suburb, but we have very few. We have a community centre and a supermarket, and that's about it. There are some schools, but there is not a general purpose state school. There's some specialist schools where people come from all over the city, and there's good parks and sports facilities, but there is no community centre. So what we need, first of all, what we need is some consultation with the residents to see actually what they want, because we're only a volunteer organisation. We can't really have the facilities to consult widely with the 7,000 or 8,000 people in the city, in the suburb. But we also want some joined up thinking as to how to achieve that. For example, we've got the proposal for the ring road, which comes up Stony Creek Road, runs right past Wakaronga School. We have the rail yard to the north, and we've got a very narrow Roberts line heading up there, which is currently being used as a bypass with and there's basically not enough room for 2 trucks to pass there. So what we would like more than anything else is for the is for some joined up thinking to make Kelvin Grove a nice place to live. Could we just step through those slides, please? because most of them have, or how do I do that? Oh, I see, thank you, right. So what we're asking for is that the council approve community facilities appropriate to the population after consulting with the residents of the suburb. Our population has gone up to over 8%, it's going up over 2% per year. I would say at the moment it's growing, we're getting... Oh, sorry, thank you. It is a rapidly growing suburb. In fact, I would think it's Palmerston North's fastest growing suburb at the moment. We have a 50-year-old second-hand community centre, which some of you may remember was once the Centennial Pavilion in the middle of the square. It got trucked out to and dumped in Kelvin Grove, well, placed in Kelvin Grove, and it's been there ever since on the edge of the suburb. And as I said, the communication, we've only got 2 roads in and out, and most of those intersections, especially the intersections onto Napier Road, are pretty dangerous. We have been promised traffic lights, but that's been put off and put off. Right, there's a map which I really want you to look at. That blue area with the red line going through it is the industrial area for Kelvin Grove. And you can see how it cuts us off from the city to the west and isolates us from the rest of the city. And you'll see a little pink square in the middle. That is the only commercial area of any size, and that is totally occupied by a supermarket. So that's what Kelvin Grove has at the moment, and I don't think that's a good example of long-term planning for the growth of the suburb. So we would really like to see the council put some effort into improving the facilities in our suburb and making it a real community in accordance with the goals of the long-term plan. The only thing in the long-term plan is they plan to make the yellow areas there increased intensification for the housing. Well, without better community facilities and without better communication links to the rest of the town, I don't really think that's a sustainable idea, and we would oppose that for the moment. Right, that's about all I've got to say. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, John, and look, thanks for the work that the Kelvin Grove Community Association do. Look, I think we've been promised the traffic lights too. That's not us. That's a state highway, but I agree with you there. Look, planning was different 30 years ago, so please, I think, understand that, you know, if we had our time again, things might be a little bit different, and there's a couple of state entities like railways right through the middle of you. But we did 7 years ago do quite a significant bit of work in Kelvin Grove, and we got a whole lot of mixed messages around a new community centre. And I'm not sure if you were around or if you can recall. I'm sure Bev can recall, but you know, there was quite a bit of work went on in that space. It may be worth digging that out and officers sending it to you, because it was a bit inconclusive where any sort of community facility should go. Salino Park, possibly, but then other parts of the community wanted on the Kura. So it was inconclusive in the end. I'm not sure if you're aware of all that.
Val has, and I have discussed it at some length. We haven't discussed it at the Community Association, but to me, the Salino Park, the southern portion of that, which is currently in demand on Saturdays for sports fields, would be the ideal place for it, next to the supermarket and car parking. And then there's empty ground to the other side of Cornerstone School, which could be used to put in additional sports facilities to take sports ground area to take replace the ones which were lost. But that's my personal opinion, not the opinion of the Community Association. And I would make the point, yes, we are where we are. How that came about, we can't change. All we can do is go forward.
And neither can we. So look, maybe the officers can dig that material out and send it to the association. It may be a good starting point to have a think about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, John. Just a couple of clarifications, really. Can you just perhaps just give us a bit of an understanding in terms of the usage of the current facility and just your views around how that fits in with social connection within the community?
Yeah, currently the hall is used about 200 to 250 hours a month. It's a hideout. There's a wide range of groups from, we have just got a community craft group and a community men's group started there. There's rock and roll, there's a church. We have just lost Get Group, who were doing holiday programs for high need kids, but their funding ran out and they haven't been able to afford it. The part of the problem with how the hall could be improved, if it was improved rather than replaced, would be better storage for community groups who use it, so they can put their specialist things away when they're not using them. We do have a couple of small storerooms, but we could do with twice as many. For example, there's a maternity unit, a maternity for help neonatal education, and they have special chairs for pregnant ladies, but we haven't got anywhere to store them, so we don't know whether we can give them a home or not, but they would use the hall sort of several hours a week for extended periods doing neonatal courses. Yes, it's a chicken and egg situation. We are using the hall as much as we can with what we've got, but it's not an ideal size and shape for a lot of community organisations which need to be able to store stuff in order to do what they want to do there.
So do you think it contributes to like that social cohesion and social capital for the community?
Yes, it does, especially with the new community craft groups we're getting. We do tend to get people for the birthday parties and other casual events. We get people from all over town. It's not a Kelvin Grove centric facility. It appears on the website, and we do get people from all over town, which is fine. But apart from the two community groups I mentioned, there's not actually a lot Kelvin Grove centric at the moment, and we would welcome any help in setting more up for that.
Great, thank you, John. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, I'm afraid with 12 seconds left on the clock, that is all we have time for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in, John, and talking to your submission, and we're deliberating on the 29th, 30th of May. We'll take into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, next we have submission number 1128 and Environment Network Manawa 2. Invite Helen King back. Welcome.
Kia ora. Thank you again, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to our submission on behalf of Environment Network Manawa 2. Now, we have written an awful lot of submissions and talked to an awful lot of councils over the last few weeks, our catchment being the Manawa 2 River, which of course touches on a lot of places. This was the last submission that we wrote, and the richness, I think, of this submission and the amount of input from member groups here has made for something quite comprehensive, quite broad and quite eclectic. I'd love to have the opportunity to talk to every little part of this in detail, but in the understanding I now have less than 9 minutes and 45 seconds, I won't. And we'll just touch on a few things here, and then I welcome your questions. One of the first things I want to touch on that I felt was really, really important, and our member groups felt was important too, is what we talked about in regards to upgraded community facilities, which we pretty much unequivocally supported. When I was writing to the support of these facilities, what crossed my mind so often is how often E&M is actually using these facilities. As the events coordinator, the amount of facilities I use around the city for our rapidly increasing amount of member and public events is massive. And it drew me back to the fact that in the 10-year plan, there is still no plan for a city Enviro Hub. This is still not there in the 10-year plan. E&M is growing. Concerns around our environment are growing as the understanding of things like climate disruption are really coming to the fore, and conversations around active transport are really coming to the fore as well. The environment isn't a community. The environment is part of who we are and inextricably part of everything we do. And it needs to be treated and prioritised that way, with a space that people can come and talk about it, and where we can showcase solutions from, and where our member groups can showcase solutions from as well. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and we talk about quite often, is food resilience and sovereignty. We understand there's a beginning of consultations around a citywide food policy, which E&M has advocated for a long time, and we're grateful to see in motion. We also notice, though, that in this plan, there is no real reference to food sovereignty and food security. It's not even put up there as a challenge, which it is still for so many people. We understand as well that when you put these things on paper, you have to resource them too. And this is a really, really big deal. We do understand, and we do ask you to consider the urgency around resourcing this further on a citywide level. Still, there are people who are struggling so much, but there are people who also want to grow their own, to learn how to grow their own, to learn how to share better, and to become food rich. We need your support in helping people do this. Linked to this is a reference we made to establishing community gardens on council land. When we came and submitted around Bilram Park and the community gardens there, we did ask the question about how we could make this easier. And it seemed to be an unequivocal, no, you can't make this easier. We challenge that, and we know that Roslyn Commons will also, if they've not already, be coming in and challenging that too. In order for people to be food secure, they need to have spaces where they can grow food. Not everybody has the space to grow food in their own properties, and not everybody owns their own properties, and there are struggles around people doing this. We support Roslyn Commons in their submission, and we want to see that no turn into a much easier yes. Just one last thing I wanted to touch on, which is very close to our hearts and our work at the moment, is Ruahine Kiwi. Some of you may be aware that this initiative is currently in jeopardy because of finishing of Jobs for Nature funding. The council does kind of tout Ruahine Kiwi as something that is a really strong environmental initiative and beacon in our area. And we ask for your support around helping us enable to continue this incredible project so we can have kiwi in our ranges by 2026. We are doing a lot of work in the background to kind of adapt our programme and make sure that we can continue and make sure we can realise this dream. But your support, whether through financial support or comms or anything like that, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for the opportunity. We remain a very, very proud sector lead and look forward to continued conversation and your questions now this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. We do have a few questions. First up is Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Helen and team. Just want to get an understanding around this Enviro Hub concept, whether or not your belief is it needs to be a physical bricks and mortar building, or whether or not a lease of an existing facility could be suitable. Because I appreciate it would take longer to build a building than it would to lease a space.
I believe that the recommendation that we've made is that we need to do a feasibility study or some kind of work that we as an organisation don't have the capacity to do, but that we'd like to see led out to say what is really needed. Like we've got tons of ideas. We've had tons of ideas for at least the last 10 years, probably 20, and I've got files of them, and we've got tons of people that really want to feed into this. I think a bricks and mortar building and space is really important. I think that it can show, what it could show is environmental sustainability, how to have a building that that breathes, and provide space for the environmental community to connect and work together, and to provide models of potentially urban farms, etc. It's a massive, quite a lot of depth to the ideas that are bubbling, but I think that the initial step and what could be included in the current long-term plan is a commitment towards looking at what that will look like and to creating a specific plan.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Helen and Mads. Just around the community gardens issue and trying to make the process easier, I understand that having to form a legal entity is a particular barrier. Are there other specific barriers that you think we should be sort of working on to try and make it easier?
Yep, there are.
Yeah, okay,
So
list them.
that is one of the barriers in terms of a group needing to either have an umbrella group, so E&M could potentially be an umbrella in that space for some people, or other groups could be, but I think the biggest barrier, or one of the bigger barriers, is the reading of the Reserves Act. So when we're looking at public land, lots of them are reserves, and so people are saying, can we have a community garden on this piece of land? Then we have to look at the Reserves Act, and it says we need to consult on how we use this piece of land. And so I'd like to see, and I'm not you guys, but what I'd like to see is a way for the city to put a policy or an overarching, community gardens are okay on our reserves, to challenge and say, how do we read that Reserves Act? Can we consult on that as a bigger piece of work and not on a piecemeal, piece by piece basis? That would be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. Tēnā kōrua. I just want to touch on the food resilience as citywide policy that's in train at the moment, and what sort of role ideally do you see council taking in that food security ecosystem? What does that look like in an ideal world?
Yeah, thanks, councillor. That's a good question. I think it takes a leadership. It can take a leadership role. That the purpose in my mind of that policy, or one of the reasons we've asked for it to happen, is so that it's front and centre across council's thinking. When we've got a policy on something in particular, it needs to be kind of considered in all of our decisions. It needs to be considered when we're building a road, or when we're, organising what's in a playground, for instance. So if there's a food policy, then it can sit across all of those things, and it sits across all of those councillors' responsibilities to make sure that they're adhering to that policy. So that's a big part of it for me. And then looking at how that also intersects with things like requests for community gardens, and support for food coordination, facilitation work. So there's a bit of that.
So if I can sneak one in as well. I'm really conscious of the difference between adopting a policy in this approach versus a strategy in this approach, one being more embedded and one being more sort of visionary. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on strategy versus policy.
I'm not a specialist in that, and I know that that's the work that Kate's going to bring to you probably next week, I believe, is some kind of recommendations around what she's been taking some good notes from the community. I'm interested to see what she says. I think that a policy is stronger, so that's where I'm pushing for.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much for coming in and submitting to us. And hearings will be on the 29th, 30th of May, and we will be making decisions then. Right, that concludes session 7 this afternoon, and we will be back at 2 p.m, councillors. No, 1:45 I've been told. Sorry, I've shortchanged you again. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.